New to America, she came to America speaking only her native language. She brought her 8-year-old son with her. He was all she had in the world. They found an apartment in Arcadia. They were there for only 2 months when a neighbor's dog jumped over the fence. The dog ran toward Nancy's son. Nancy put her body in between the dog and her son. The dog stopped when it saw Nancy screaming at it. She was going to punch it in the nose. The dog turned around. Shaking, Nancy took her son upstairs. They stayed in the apartment all weekend. Then Nancy found another apartment close to the school that her son was going to attend. She and her son walked everywhere. One day her son started coughing badly. He had an asthma attack. All the walking was making his asthma worse. Nancy knew that she had to buy a car, so she called up the Honda dealer. She talked to a salesman who spoke her language. She told him that she wanted to buy a new car if he could come over to pick her up. The salesman said he would be right over. It was time for a haircut. Lenny didn't even have to look in the mirror. Even though he was going bald, he knew that he needed to cut his hair every 2 weeks. He had a tongue of hair on the top of his head. His hair was thinning at the crown. He still had plenty of hair on the sides and back. It was what they call salt and pepper, a mixture of gray hair and dark brown hair. It was only a few years, he figured, until the salt and pepper became just salt. He never let his hair grow for more than 2 weeks. The longer it got, the worse it looked, he thought. He spread a newspaper over the bathroom sink so that no hair went down the drain. He plugged in the clippers and started cutting his hair. He started at the back of his head, went to the sides, and finished on the top. Every minute or so, he had to clean the hair out of the blades with an old toothbrush. Finished, he picked up a hand mirror to check out the back of his head. Everything looked okay. He carried the newspaper back out to the kitchen and shook the hair clippings into the trash can. Then he took a shower. The yard man comes every 2 weeks. He drives a gray pickup truck. The truck is a Ford. It is about 15 years old, but it runs well. It doesn't burn oil, and it gets decent gas mileage. The yard man's name is Byron. In the back of his truck are a lawnmower, a leaf blower, a rake, and a shovel. Byron uses the leaf blower to blow leaves and dirt from the back of the building out to the front of the building. Then he rakes up the leaves into a bag. He blows the dirt out into the street. He cuts the lawn with his lawnmower. He trims the hedge. He uses the leaf blower to blow the dirt off each welcome mat that lies in front of each apartment door. Then he puts all the leaves, the grass trimmings, and the hedge clippings into a wheelbarrow. He pushes the wheelbarrow to the back of the building, where he uses his big shovel to empty the wheelbarrow contents into the big dumpster. It takes Byron about 2 hours to do this work. When he is done, he goes half a block up the street to the house on the corner. There, he does the same work again. It looked like rain. The sky was gray. It was almost noon, but the sun was hidden by a gray blanket. It was cool. There were no birds flying anywhere. A couple of birds sat on the telephone wire. Bob was standing outside talking to Bill. They both had their hands in their pockets. They knew that it was probably going to rain shortly. A sudden breeze blew some leaves off a tree onto the sidewalk. A young woman wearing a dark blue coat and jeans walked by. She was walking a small dog. It was pure white and pretty. It sniffed at a tree trunk. The woman waited patiently. Finally, the dog lifted its leg. Bob said that he liked the rain. It was a nice change from the usual hot Los Angeles weather, and the plants could always use the extra water. Bill said the only thing he didn't like about rain was that all the motor oil on the streets would get washed into the ocean, and so would all the trash. "But that never stops the surfers," Bob said. "They don't seem to care what's in the water, as long as there are waves to surf on." Jim went to the thrift shop. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. He liked to go there just to browse. A big sign on the front door said "Open." The shop was closed on Sunday and Monday. The rest of the week it opened at 10 a.m. and closed at 2 p.m. 2 women worked inside. They rang up sales and put the items into plastic bags for the customers to carry out. At the back of the shop was a big room where another lady worked. She sorted the new donations and put price tags on them. At the end of each day, she would bring the new donations out to the main part of the shop. Everyone who worked at the thrift shop was a volunteer. The only payment they received was that they had the opportunity to see and buy any items in the shop before the customers did. When Jim entered, the lady at the register told him hello. He smiled and said hello. She knew Jim because he was a regular customer. Jim said, "What's new?" She laughed and said that nothing was ever new at a thrift shop. "It's always old and it's always used," she smiled. Jim looked at the watches in the glass case. He saw one that he liked. "Could I look at that one?" he asked. Laura went to the stable. 4 horses stood there. She put a saddle on Star. He was 7 years old, big and dark brown. Her sister came out to the stable. They were both going to exercise the horses. It was a warm, sunny day. Janice saddled up Moonbeam, a white mare. They got on the horses and started walking them. A few minutes later, Laura was telling Janice about the new doctor in her hospital. She raised her hand for a second to make a point. Just then, Star bucked. Laura went flying into the air. She landed on her head and shoulder on the grass. "Oh my gosh," Jan cried. "Laura, are you all right?" Laura moaned. Jan gently rolled her over. She didn't see any blood. That's good, she thought. "Can you move? You're not paralyzed anywhere, are you?" Jan pulled Laura up into a sitting position. Laura slightly moved her legs and arms. She wasn't paralyzed. When she moved her right hand to touch her head, she groaned. "What's the matter?" "That hurt. When I moved my arm, it hurt." They still didn't see any blood. Jan unbuttoned the top buttons on Laura's blouse and looked at Laura's right collarbone. "Oh no," she said. Mike looked at the label on the big plastic container. It said garlic powder. There was a U with a circle around it after the word powder. What does this U mean? Mike wondered. Under the word powder was another word, seasoning. Under that word was a drawing of a garlic bulb. Mike knew that food labels can be tricky. Powder is powder, but seasoning could mean salt. He looked all around the plastic container for an ingredients label. There wasn't one. In small print, under the drawing of the garlic bulb, was a phone number, 1-800-632-6900. "Call that number if you have comments or questions," the label said. Mike called the number. A woman answered. He asked her what the U inside a circle meant. She said it meant kosher. Kosher food is food that is prepared according to Jewish law. Mike asked where the ingredients label was. She said, if there is only one ingredient, there is no ingredients label. "So there is no salt in this product?" Mike asked. "No, sir," she said. "It's 100% garlic powder." "Why does it say product of USA and China?" She said that sometimes they get the garlic from China, sometimes they get it from the U.S. Ben leaned over the edge of the tub. He turned on the hot and cold water faucets. The water came out of the spout near the top of the tub. He pushed down on the lever beneath the spout so that the water would drain. He was going to take a shower, not a bath. He tested the temperature. It wasn't hot enough. He adjusted the hot water faucet. There was another handle between the hot and cold faucets. This one controlled whether water came out of the spout or out of the shower head. Ben turned it all the way to the right. Now hot water was coming out of the shower head. The temperature was just right. Ben took off his robe and stepped over the top of the tub. He pulled the shower door closed. He grabbed the bar of soap out of the soap dish and started scrubbing his face. While his eyes were closed to keep out the soap, he put the soap back into the dish. Then he reached for the big plastic container of shampoo on his window ledge. The bottle slipped out of his hands and landed on his left foot. "Shoot!" Ben said angrily. "That hurt." Pete was in his kitchen. He was about to slice 3 green apples. He liked to eat fresh apples with cinnamon sprinkled on them. He opened the blinds so that he could get more sunlight into the kitchen. Now he could see what he was doing. He grabbed a knife out of a drawer. It said, "Surgical Stainless USA" on the side of the blade. The blade was very thin and light. It had teeth like a saw. The handle was a brown piece of cheap hollow plastic. He had bought this knife about 20 years ago at a county fair. It was one of those knives that were advertised on TV. It could cut through a tomato can and then cut easily and cleanly through a fresh tomato. You never need to sharpen it. The sharp edge is guaranteed for life. That's how they advertised it. And Pete, for once, couldn't argue that the advertisers lied. This was a great knife. But it was also a dangerous knife. A couple of years ago, Pete was careless. He was rapidly slicing a potato, and the blade got his finger. The doctor put 3 stitches in Pete's finger. "Next time, be more careful," the doctor said. No kidding, Pete thought. He was so careful that he didn't use the knife for almost a year. Simon got a monthly bill that he didn't like. His internet service provider, Wink, automatically withdrew $15 from his checking account each month. This was called direct payment. It made things simpler for him because it meant one less check to write each month. In fact, Simon had direct payments with his gas company, his phone company, and his electric company. So that was 4 fewer checks that he had to write each month. This month, instead of $15, Wink had withdrawn $75. Simon went online and looked at his account. Part of the increase was because he had switched from a slow dial-up connection to a fast DSL connection. Wink charged him $45 just to make that switch. Simon thought that this charge in itself was ridiculous. It probably took them about 5 seconds to make the switch. But any time a corporation can gouge you, they will. In addition to the $45, Wink had charged him $15 for his dial-up account, but had also charged him $15 for his DSL account. This was a double charge, since a computer uses dial-up or DSL, but not both. "We'll see about this," Simon thought, as he searched for Wink's 800 number. Gordon was hungry. He opened the refrigerator. There must be something in here to eat, he thought. There was, a single hot dog. He took it out of its package and put a small frying pan onto the stove's gas burner. He turned on the heat. Then he poured a little bit of vegetable oil into the pan. He sliced the hot dog in half lengthwise. When the oil got hot, he put the 2 halves in the pan. About a minute later, he flipped each half over. After another minute, he took the hot dog out of the pan. Gordon put 2 slices of bread into the toaster. This was tasty and healthy bread. The first ingredient listed was organic sprouted wheat. The first ingredient in ordinary bread is usually unbleached flour. When the toast popped up, he put mustard, mayonnaise, and ketchup on one slice, Then he added 2 slices of onion. On top of the onions, he placed the hot dog. On top of the hot dog, he put a couple of slices of apple. Then he added some bits of hot green chili, and then put the top piece of toast onto the chili bits. Ah, what a sandwich, he thought, as he sat down to eat. Sarah needed to see the doctor. She had an upset stomach. She felt bloated and needed to pass gas every minute or so. This was terrible. She couldn't go anywhere in public. Her friends told her it was because she had moved to America. The air, water, and food in America weren't agreeing with her. They said she would have to return to her home country. No way, Sarah said. She didn't want to go home. She liked America. This was a minor problem, she was sure. Any good doctor would solve it in no time. 2 days later, she saw her doctor. He asked her if she drank milk. She said yes, 3 glasses a day. Don't drink any more regular milk. Start drinking lactose-free milk, because lactose can upset your stomach. Then he asked her if there were any big problems in her life. She said that her boyfriend was a big problem. He wanted to get married, but she didn't. The doctor said that she should find another boyfriend. Why? Sarah asked. Because your boyfriend is giving you too much stress. He is probably the main cause of your upset stomach. I don't think my boyfriend is going to like that. Just tell him if he really loves you, he should leave you. Jill answered the phone. It was Jack. Jill, will you marry me next week? What? Jack repeated his question. Of course not, she replied. She wondered why he was asking her that question. They had already agreed that when people get married, they immediately start to take each other for granted. They don't do the little things like opening the car door or holding hands. They get too comfortable. They treat their partner like an old shoe, and eventually they get bored with each other and get divorced. We already agreed that we don't want to get married because we don't want to get divorced. Jack agreed, but he argued that they were special. They were different from other couples. They loved each other too much to end up in a divorce. Yes, that may be true, but still, why next week? Why can't we think about it for another year or 2? Because I had 2 dreams the last 2 nights. In both dreams, you left me for another man. In fact, you left me for 2 different men. I want to get married now, so I don't have these dreams anymore. What did these men look like? Saturday morning meant one thing for Susan: doing the laundry. She hated doing the laundry. Unenthusiastically, she took the pillowcases off all the pillows. Then she removed the fitted sheet from the mattress. She took the towel off the towel bar in the bathroom. She grabbed a couple of dirty dish towels out of the kitchen and looked all around her apartment for anything else that needed washing. In the corner of her living room, a can of coins sat on top of the file cabinet. She fished out 7 quarters. She opened the cabinet under her kitchen sink and grabbed a plastic bottle of liquid detergent. Finally, she set her electronic timer for 35 minutes. The timer would remind her that the washing was done and that it was time to go back downstairs and put the clothes into the dryer for 40 minutes. Without the timer, Susan would completely forget to check her clothes. Susan carried the laundry basket downstairs. How happy she would be when her laundry was done for this week. As she approached the laundry room, she heard a familiar sound. The sound was the washer washing and the dryer drying. One of her neighbors had got there before her. Muttering, Susan took her basket back upstairs. Barbara couldn't take it any more. Her upstairs neighbor was blasting his stereo again. She had asked him twice already to turn the volume down. The first time she asked, he was surprised. He said he didn't know that she could hear his stereo. "Yes," she said, "it's just like your stereo was in my living room. I can hear every note." He said he would keep it down. She hoped that he was telling the truth. Of course he wasn't. The very next day he blasted his stereo. She marched upstairs to remind him of his promise. He said the volume was so low that he could barely hear it. She asked him to turn it lower. He said he would try. Barbara could swear that when she re-entered her apartment, the music was louder than when she had walked upstairs. So this was the third time. She took her baseball bat upstairs with her. She knocked very loudly on his door. When he opened the door, she screamed at him like a crazy person. She told him she would kill him if he didn't turn the music down and keep it down. His eyes got big. She went back downstairs. She couldn't hear a note. "I can't believe I said that," she told herself. Norma was discouraged. She was a new realtor. She had recently passed the state test on her first try. Then she joined a realty company. They offered training classes 2 to 4 times a week. Norma attended the classes faithfully. But because English was her second language, she didn't catch everything that the instructor said. When she asked the instructor to repeat something, he told her to see him after class. But when other students asked a question, the instructor answered the question right then and there. To Norma, the instructor always said, "See me after class." Then, when she tried to see him after class, he would say that he was late for an appointment. "How about next time?" he would say. He was always too busy to help her. "He's not too busy, he's just too lazy," her boyfriend said. There are too many instructors like that. All they care about is presenting their information. If the students don't get it, that's their problem. You have to be strong. These people are not going to help you. They want you to fail because that means less competition for them. It's a dog-eat-dog business. Jennifer's ears were talking to her. They were making little sounds, like little bubbles bursting. A bubble was bursting almost every second. It was not painful, but annoying. She knew the cause. While she was cleaning the whiteboard after her class ended last night, the fire alarm went off. Instead of leaving the building immediately, she walked around to see what the problem was. The blaring alarm sounded like the busy signal on a phone, but 1,000 times louder. The school seemed to be empty. Then she walked by one room and saw about 7 students inside. Just then the night supervisor came by. She told everyone to leave immediately. The students were packing their hair care equipment into their bags. The night supervisor waited impatiently. Finally, after almost 5 minutes, all the students and their teacher left the building. They apologized for being so slow. The firemen never arrived. Instead, a school police officer showed up. He walked around the area with the supervisor. It was a false alarm. The officer used his key to finally turn off the alarm. But it was too late for Jennifer. She had listened to the loud alarm for too long. She should have known better. Even as she drove home, her ears felt strange. Eddie drove over to see Betty. When he got to her apartment at about 3:15 p.m., he saw that her car wasn't in the carport. So he wrote a note. "Hi, Betty. I love you and I miss you. Love, Eddie." He was about to tape the note onto her front door when he saw her car pull up. She walked up the stairs. Instead of the big smile, hug, and kiss that she usually greeted him with, she simply said, "What's up?" "You didn't call me back for the last 2 days, honey, so I came over to see you." He gave her the note. She opened it, read it, and put it on the kitchen table. "That's sweet," she said. She walked into her bedroom. Eddie followed her. She put her purse on the bed. Eddie tried to hug her. "I have to wash my hands," she said. When she came out of the bathroom, she told Eddie that he should go home. She said that she was hungry and tired. She was going to fix something to eat. Then she was going to take a nap. She said that she might call him later. During Eddie's entire 5-minute visit, Betty had constantly avoided his eyes. Instead of walking him out to his car, like she usually did, Betty locked her front door as soon as Eddie was outside her apartment. Helen stepped outside her front door to see what the weather was like. It was sunny and warm. That was nice because for the past 2 weeks it had been cold and rainy. It had been so cold that she had had to turn her heater on. She was lucky because her heater worked and she could pay her heating bills. Some people in Los Angeles were not so lucky. Unable to use their home heater, they placed charcoal into a barbecue grill and lit it. The heat kept them warm, but the carbon monoxide killed them. This happens almost every winter in Los Angeles. People shut all the windows tight to keep the cold out, then light the charcoal. Soon enough, the oxygen in their home is consumed by the open flames. The family suffocates to death. Everyone knows that smoke detectors are required in Los Angeles, but many people don't know about or don't think they need carbon monoxide detectors. They're not expensive. A $25 investment can save a family from death. People always think that nothing bad will happen to them. It always happens to the other guy. So they forget to put fresh batteries into their smoke detectors annually, and they don't bother to buy carbon monoxide detectors. Liz was excited. She was going to Asia with her mom. Neither of them had ever traveled out of the United States before. They were going to fly to Hong Kong. After staying in Hong Kong for 3 nights, they would travel on their cruise ship to Shanghai and Beijing. Beijing is inland, so we have to take about a 2-hour bus ride to get there from the port. I forget the name of the port. Anyway, we're going to see the Great Wall, the Tiananmen Square, and the Forbidden City. It's going to be so cool, she told her neighbor Jane. From China, the cruise ship would go to Busan in South Korea, and finally to Tokyo. From Tokyo, they would catch a flight back to Los Angeles. The trip is going to last 3 weeks. It's only going to cost us $2,800 each, if we can control our urge to shop, she laughed. I hope your trip is more fun than mine was, said Jane. I took a cruise to the Bahamas, but almost all the passengers got sick. I caught some kind of virus that made me throw up for almost 3 days. They gave us a discount that we could use on a future trip. Ha! No more cruising for me. We've heard about those disasters, said Liz. Mom and I are going to be washing our hands every 30 minutes, and we're bringing surgical masks with us. Jerome turned off the TV. He had just watched a couple of South Park cartoons. South Park is an amusing series about elementary school kids living in a small town in Colorado. The first cartoon was about Herman, who wanted to become strong and muscular. He asked his mother to buy a supplement that was advertised on TV. The supplement was actually nothing but sugar, but the TV ad promised that it would make you strong and muscular. Instead, it made Herman very fat. Worse, Herman refused to believe that he had become fat. Even though all his friends were calling him Super Fat Boy, he told them that he was Super Muscle Boy. Finally, when Herman walked onto the stage to receive an award in the school auditorium, the stage collapsed. Then he realized that maybe he was super fat. The second cartoon was about a dog that followed Lenny home. Lenny loved the dog until he found out it was gay. Then he hated the dog. But Big Al took Lenny to the city's home for gay animals. While there, Lenny decided that it was okay to be gay. When he got home, he hugged his dog and took it for a walk. He didn't even mind when it sniffed other male dogs. George wore a pair of blue shorts around the house. They were old, faded, and ugly, but they were comfortable. And when you are at home, you want to be comfortable. It wouldn't be called home sweet home if you didn't feel comfortable there. But when he put on his blue shorts one morning, the button was just hanging on by a thread. That single button was the only thing that held his shorts up. George could do two things. He could wait until the button fell off. When that happened, it would probably roll under the sofa and be lost forever. Or he could sew the button on securely before it fell off. He found his sewing kit. He threaded the needle and tied a knot at the end of the thread. Then he started the needle through the cloth. He directed it through one of the holes in the button. Then he reversed direction. He put the needle back through a different hole and then through the cloth again. He repeated this motion through all 4 buttonholes until the button was tight. Then he tied a bunch of knots in the last bit of thread and snipped off the excess thread. He put on the shorts and buttoned the button. It was strong. Good for another 10 years, he smiled to himself. Sammy looked at the pile of paper on the floor. Whenever he finished reading his mail or a newspaper or magazine, he threw it into this pile. This was his recycling pile. At the moment, it was almost 2 feet high. It was time to recycle. He squatted down, protecting his back. Sometimes, just sitting down would cause his back to go out for a week. He scooped his hands under the pile and slowly stood up. He walked over to his front door. Hands full, he struggled to turn the doorknob and open the door. He walked outside and down the stairs. So far, he hadn't dropped one piece of paper. He walked to the blue trash bin. There was no way to lift the lid of the recycling bin with his hands full. He carefully put the pile of papers down and then opened the lid. The bin was completely full. Sammy gathered the pile into his arms and trudged back upstairs. Pleased that he still had not dropped any paper, he lowered the pile back onto the floor. Then he stood up, but just a little bit too fast. Kevin had just finished dessert. It was a piece of dark chocolate, washed down with a glass of cold milk. Delicious. He rinsed his mouth out with a glass of water and then spit into the kitchen sink. He sat down at the dining room table and grabbed some floss. He carefully flossed his top teeth and then his bottom teeth. Flossing was a chore. The floss almost always got stuck between 2 teeth in the upper back and 2 teeth in the lower front. Finally finished, he threw the frayed floss into the trash. He went into the bathroom and grabbed his electric toothbrush. TV ads always show people putting toothpaste onto the entire length of the brush. Of course, that was to get them to use up the tube faster, so they'd have to buy another tube sooner. Kevin put just a little toothpaste onto the brush. He brushed for about a minute. He spent another 30 seconds brushing his tongue. Then he spit out all the toothpaste and gargled and spit again. Brushing and flossing are such a pain, he thought. If they can put a man on the moon, why can't they invent something easier and faster than toothpaste and dental floss? Louise and Neil had been dating for 3 years. She was 40 and he was 50. They wanted to get married and have 2 kids as soon as possible, but there was a problem. They disagreed on how they would raise their kids. Because Louise had a high-paying job, Neil could stay home and raise the kids. He looked forward to that because he felt that he would be a great dad. First, he would teach them how to read. Then he would teach them about life. His kids were not going to waste their time reading fairy tales and watching Sesame Street. They were going to learn practical stuff, like how to use Microsoft Office and how to get a 4-year scholarship to Harvard. He wanted them to become business majors because business is where the money is. Louise had other plans. She wanted her kids to relax and enjoy life. She didn't want them to grow up too fast. She was the oldest child in a poor family, and her father had put her to work in the fields as soon as she turned 6. Life had been hard for her. She didn't want it to be hard for her children. Neil said not to worry. There was still plenty of time for him to figure out a way for the kids to have fun and still become happy millionaires. Mildred's sister called. She was going to drop by, and whenever she visited, she usually made at least one trip to the bathroom. That meant one thing. Mildred needed to clean her toilet bowl. This was the household chore that she hated the most. It was so icky. She grabbed the cleanser from beneath the bathroom sink. She sprinkled lots of it into the toilet bowl. Then she got out of her clothes, put on a big t-shirt, and pulled on her long-sleeved rubber gloves. Finally, she put on her goggles because she didn't want any toilet water to splash into her eyes. She didn't know if toilet water could cause an eye infection, but she wasn't going to take any chances. She grabbed the long-handled toilet bowl brush that was beneath the sink. She started scrubbing. She scrubbed under the rim, all around the bowl, and deep into the throat of the bowl. 5 minutes later, she figured she was finished. She flushed the toilet and checked the bowl. It was clean as a whistle. Mildred breathed a sigh of relief, because usually she had to scrub the bowl twice to remove all the stains. She removed her goggles, gloves, and t-shirt. Then she hopped into the shower. Bill wrote this letter to Mary. We've talked on the phone and in my apartment, and now I'm writing this letter. Maybe if I put my thoughts and feelings in writing, you'll understand them better. I love you. I want to marry you. I want to be with you for the rest of my life. You are the most wonderful woman I have ever met. You are not a load. You are not a troublemaker. Yes, you have problems. So do I. And together we can solve these problems more easily than if we were apart. Problems are a part of life, but so is happiness. Let's share our problems and happiness instead of experiencing them alone. We are not a bad fit. We are a perfect match. I do not look down on you. I look up to you. I admire you. I think you are smart, brave, and independent. Don't tell me to go find another woman. I don't want another woman. I have found the perfect woman. Every day I think about your beautiful smile, your happy laugh. I think about the long walks we used to take, holding hands all the way. Remember how we used to sit on the grass in the park and watch the parrots? We were going to get married, and now you want to be just friends. Whatever I did or said that was wrong, please tell me so we can work this out. I don't want to lose you. Spock is a main character in the popular TV show Star Trek. He is half Vulcan, half human. A Vulcan has no emotions, but is extremely smart and logical. Spock joined the all-human crew of the spaceship Enterprise to explore the universe. Spock's dad, Sarek, is Vulcan. He had wanted Spock to attend the Vulcan Science Academy and then join Sarek's research firm. When Spock left his family to join the Enterprise, Sarek refused to talk to him anymore. In one episode, representatives from various planets had an emergency meeting. Sarek and Amanda, Spock's human mom, came aboard the Enterprise. Spock said hello to his dad, but Sarek ignored him. The next day, Sarek had a critical medical problem. He was losing a lot of blood and needed immediate surgery. Spock was the only one on the Enterprise who also had Vulcan blood. Even though he could die, Spock offered every drop of his blood to save his dad. Dr. Bones McCoy operated on Sarek and saved his life. The next day, when Sarek was told that his son had saved his life, he didn't say thank you to Spock. Amanda got very angry with her husband. She told him that he should hug Spock and thank him. Sarek refused. He said that his son did the logical thing. "You don't thank someone for doing the logical thing," he told his wife. Spock told Amanda that his dad was right, which made her even angrier. Heather loved the freedom of soaring high above the land and sea. She learned how to hang glide from her boyfriend. Initially, she was scared to death. The first time he took her up, she hung on for dear life. But by the end of that flight, she was hooked. Half a year later, she bought her own hang glider. Almost every weekend, she drove to Torrey Pines and leaped off the cliff. She could soar to La Jolla in less than 5 minutes. She liked to fly over the town. She would wave at kids, pointing and looking up at her, and they would shout and wave back excitedly. One day she was returning to the launch site when she noticed a red hawk rapidly approaching her. It briefly disappeared. Then she heard its claws ripping the wing's fabric. It flew off, but the next thing she knew, it was flying straight at her. She turned out of its way, but it dove at her again. She was scared. She had to evade its attacks 4 times before she was able to land safely. Even after she landed, it circled overhead, as if daring her to fly again. "What did I do to you?" she wondered. As she drove home, she found out that she had been lucky. The radio news reported that in Australia, a hang glider had been attacked by not 1, but 2 eagles. Maybe it was something in the air, Heather thought. Rod was a manager at House Depot. He worked about 50 hours a week. He loved his job, although the extra hours cut into the time he could spend with his 3 little girls. One morning, he was supposed to go home at 7 a.m. Instead, he stayed on to help out for 3 more hours. He was just about to leave at 10 a.m. when he heard something. At one of the checkout counters, he saw a man dressed in white painter's coveralls pointing a gun at the female checker. He had on a yellow cap, a white plastic painter's mask, and white gloves. Rod hurried over. Times in Los Angeles had changed. All managers now received training on how to respond to armed robberies and hostage-taking. Rod was nervous, but he knew what he was supposed to do. He approached the gunman. "Sir, please don't point that gun. We will give you all the money you—" The gunman didn't even wait for Rod to finish his sentence. He shot Rod in the stomach. The checker screamed. The gunman ran out to a white van and hopped in. The van sped off. Rod didn't even make it to surgery. The killing made all the TV news shows. House Depot offered a $100,000 reward. Jay was born to ride. Just after learning to walk, he got his first tricycle. A year later, he was on a bicycle with training wheels. At the age of 5, he was a skilled bicyclist, able to jump off ramps and fly through the air. His father made sure he did everything safely. Jay wore a helmet, a chest pad, elbow pads, and knee pads. He fell a lot, but he was never hurt badly. He got his first motorcycle when he was 7. His father put the motorcycle in the back of his pickup and drove Jay out to the desert almost every weekend. Jay became a skilled rider. He entered motocross races all over the county. By the time he was 15, he had won 30 races. His future looked bright. When he was 17, Jay took his girlfriend out for a ride on his motorcycle. A truck ran a red light, and Jay and his girlfriend crashed into the side of the truck. Jay went into the hospital for 3 months. His girlfriend died immediately. Jay didn't ride a motorcycle again for 10 years. Then one weekend, he bought a used Kawasaki. He took it out for a test run at dusk. It felt good to ride again. He got it up to 110 miles an hour on the local freeways. A highway patrol car chased him for about 10 minutes, but he finally lost it in the freeway traffic and the dark. When he got home, he was excited. That was fun, he thought. Myra told Myron that they shouldn't see each other for a while. Her doctor had suggested that she take a short vacation from her job and a long vacation from Myron. "What did you tell him about me?" Myron asked. She told her doctor that she had dreams about Myron leaving her. She sometimes dreamed that he pushed her out of his car in the middle of nowhere. She would be crying on the side of the road in the middle of the night, cold and scared, as the taillights disappeared. "What kind of dream is that?" Myron's voice was loud. "Do you think I would ever do that to you?" She said that she didn't know. "You don't know? Of course I wouldn't do that to you. I love you." Myra asked Myron to lower his voice. She no longer believed that he loved her. One day, feeling low and insecure, she had told Myron that it would be nice to get away for the weekend. Perhaps they could go to a quiet resort in the mountains. He told her that he was playing golf that Saturday. Maybe they could go to a resort another time. She was astounded. "I needed you that weekend. Instead, you preferred to play golf. Now there is a shadow on my heart that nothing can remove," she told him sadly. Once in a while, someone dies and you remember where you were and what you were doing when you heard the sad news. Thousands of people worldwide felt that way when they heard that the beautiful Anna Nicole Smith had suddenly died. It was a tragedy that shocked the nation, according to various TV and radio reporters. The nation is in mourning, these same reporters claimed. She was only 39. Her husband discovered her lying in bed unconscious and not breathing. Paramedics quickly arrived and tried to revive her, but it was too late. Her body was taken to the morgue, where the coroner did an autopsy the next day. No evidence of drugs was found. It might have been a heart attack, but further testing was necessary. Anna was a cover girl, a model, and an actress. She married a billionaire who was 89 when she was only 25. The billionaire died a couple of years later. Anna went to court to get her fair share of her husband's wealth. The case was still unresolved when she died. Now it will continue after her death because Anna has a newborn daughter. The daughter might be entitled to millions when the court case is finally settled. At least 3 men have claimed to be the father of this millionaire baby. Look at those abandoned shopping carts, Joe thought. 2 of them were parked on his front lawn. 2 more were parked behind his car in the driveway. His neighborhood had gone downhill. He lived half a mile from Foodco, a supermarket chain. Nobody should take a shopping cart half a mile from the supermarket, and no one with any respect for others should leave a shopping cart in a stranger's yard. Shoppers should push the cart out to their car and then leave it there. If they don't own a car, they should buy their own personal cart to transport their groceries home. He called Foodco to tell them that 4 carts were on his property. They said they would be over as soon as they could. That meant about a week. Throughout his neighborhood, carts were scattered in various places, including the streets themselves. As if kids, pets, and potholes weren't enough, drivers now had to dodge shopping carts. Joe wondered how there could be any left in the supermarket. Foodco paid over $100 for each cart, so he thought they'd guard them better. Instead, they did nothing to secure the carts. They simply paid someone to drive around the neighborhood once or twice a week to pick up stranded carts. Joe opened the yellow pages of his phone book. He was going to hire a contractor to build a fence around his lawn and a locking gate for his driveway. Enough was enough. An Italian couple murdered 4 people in the house next door. They slit the throats of their neighbor, Maria Como, and her mom. Then they slit the throats of Mrs. Como's 2-year-old little boy, Perry, and a woman who just happened to be visiting. Finally, they set the house on fire. This all happened 2 weeks before Christmas. The couple had complained constantly to the Comos about the noise they caused, but no one else in the neighborhood seemed to think that the Comos were noisy. Maria was a kind and quiet person, said one of her neighbors. She and her husband used to push little Perry around the neighborhood in his stroller. They were friendly to everyone. I can't believe this happened. Police in the northern Italian town could not believe it either. A spokesman said that never in the history of Italy had a married couple worked as a team to slice 4 neighbors' throats and then try to burn their house down. I think if they claim temporary insanity, everyone will believe it, said the spokesman. After firemen found the 4 bodies, the couple calmly confessed to the police. 2 girls were trick-or-treating on Halloween night when a large group of teens attacked them, leaving both high school seniors unconscious. One needed surgery to repair her eye socket. The victims were white, and their attackers were black. 7 attackers were girls, and 1 was an 18-year-old boy. The boy said that he did not attack the girls. He tried to protect them. So why were you swinging a skateboard? Asked the witness. The boy said that he was swinging the skateboard at the attackers, not the victims. The prosecution added hate crime to the charge of assault because racial slurs were made before the victims were attacked. The trial in Long Beach lasted almost 4 weeks. All the attackers were found guilty, but not one spent even a day in jail. The judge sentenced them to house arrest for a month. House arrest meant that they had to sleep in their own beds at home. The boy had to do 20 hours of community service. Law-abiding white and black adults were outraged at the light sentences. The 2 girls required hospital care, yet the thugs received a mere slap on the wrist. Concerned parents immediately created a website for recalling the judge. Gary and Alma were having problems again. "But you told me it was okay to call up Carol," said Gary. "I asked you if it was okay to talk to her because it was her birthday, and I've wished her a happy birthday every year for the last 10 years. But you had already promised me that you would never call her again. You promised me that, so you lied to me." "But I had forgotten that I told you that. You know that I forget things. I'm not going to argue with you. You have a memory like an elephant. But you got to believe me, I completely forgot. And more important, Carol is just a friend." "No, she isn't. She's still in love with you." "But I'm not in love with her. She can love me all she wants, but I'm not in love with her. I never was." "Well, you say that. Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't. But the important thing is that you never know what the future will bring. You say that nothing will happen between you and her, but you don't know that for sure because you don't know the future." "Yes, you're right. No one knows the future. I could fall in love with her again, and she and I might run off and get married and have 9 or 10 kids." "Again? What do you mean, again?" Redfield, New York, received 12 feet of snow last week. Its neighbors in Oswego are jealous because they got only 10 feet of snow. An Oswego resident told a TV reporter that one more storm was coming in that would determine the winner. "I hope we get 5 more feet," he said. "That'll beat Redfield. This is the most snow the region has received in 6 years. The people who worry about global warming should come visit us. They'll worry less," said a Redfield resident. He said any visitors would have to wait till some snow melted because most local roads were closed. Even the snowplows were waiting until after the next storm before they began to clear all the roads. Schools were closed all week. Most kids were happy about it. They couldn't go ice skating or skiing because the roads were closed. But they did play in the snow, make snowmen, and have snowball fights. "It wasn't a good week for me," complained one high school student. "I had to help my dad shovel all the snow off the roof. When he finished doing that, his dad asked him to shovel the snow off the driveway and the sidewalk. 'I can't wait for school to reopen,' he said." Scott was sound asleep when the phone rang. "Are you awake?" Jolene shouted. Scott mumbled something. How could he still be asleep, she asked. It was almost noon. He told her that he hadn't gone to sleep until 6 a.m. Jolene told him to get up and come pick her up. They had to go to the store to return the birthday gift he had given her. It was a tangerine plant. The leaves were curling up. It was going to die, she said. "Curling leaves means the plant is going to die?" Scott asked. "Of course," she told him. "Look, honey," he asked, "let me go back to sleep for 1 hour, okay? Then I'll come pick you up." Jolene wondered why he needed 1 hour. Was he expecting a phone call from his ex-girlfriend? No, he patiently tried to explain. He just wanted to get another hour of sleep. But he could not sleep any more. Once Jolene mentioned anything about Amy, he'd better get over there quickly. Scott broke up with Amy 5 years ago. Now they were just friends. But Amy still loved him. That wasn't a problem for Scott until Jolene found out about it. If Amy still loved Scott, Jolene figured that they just might get back together. She can recognize a dying plant, but not a dead love affair, Scott grumbled as he rolled out of bed. Maria had to buy food for herself and her son. Divorced for 10 years, she was used to doing the shopping for her son. He was a junior in high school, which meant that he would be entering college in 2 years. Then she would be shopping only for herself. She felt sad when she thought of this. She hoped that he would attend the local junior college and then transfer to a university. That way, he could continue to live at home for another 2 years. She loved him and dreaded the day that he would no longer be her daily company. Maria drove to Costco, a chain store that sold food in bulk packages. By selling in bulk only, the store helps its customers save money. She parked far from the entrance. That meant a longer walk, but also a faster exit from the parking lot. She grabbed one of the big shopping carts outside and pushed it into the store. Her purse stayed tightly hung over her shoulder. Surprisingly, the store wasn't too crowded. In the produce section, she examined 9 packages of seedless green grapes before she found one that she liked. She carefully selected some bananas, apples, and other fruit, but she couldn't find her son's favorite brand of tangerines. On the way home, she planned to stop at another market or two until she found them. Rebecca's stomach hurt. She said that sometimes it felt like someone was peeling the skin off her belly. That pain felt worse than when she gave birth 17 years ago. She finally went to a doctor. He asked a lot of questions and then examined her. He decided that she needed a couple of ultrasound tests. The tests revealed that she had 2 small ovarian cysts. The doctor said he did not think that those cysts were causing the problem. He wanted to do another test. It was called a colonoscopy. Rebecca told her boyfriend Ron about the doctor's suggestion. A colonoscopy? You've got a problem in your belly, and he wants to examine your butt? Where did you find this quack? I'll bet he got his degree off the internet. Rebecca asked her boyfriend where he got his medical degree from. Of course, he had no medical degree, but he told Rebecca that it was just common sense. If your car isn't running right, and the mechanic wants to look in your trunk to find the problem, what would you think? Would you let him charge you good money to examine your trunk, or would you go find a mechanic who knows what he's doing? Rebecca went to a medical site on the internet later and discovered that some colon problems definitely could cause stomach pains. About 100,000 people die each year in U.S. hospitals from infections that they get while they're in the hospital. Less than half that many die on U.S. highways. The hospital deaths are due to poor housekeeping and poor hygiene. Floors, walls, and doors are not cleaned regularly or thoroughly. Room dividers are almost never cleaned. The carts that carry food trays and the trays themselves are usually contaminated from handling and coughing. Cooks and other food handlers can easily infect the food by not washing properly after using the bathroom. Doctors and nurses are just as guilty as other staff. Doctors rarely clean their stethoscopes after each patient. Nurses apply blood pressure cuffs to patient after patient without cleaning the cuffs. Doctors often put on gloves without washing their hands first. As a result, the germs on their hands are transferred to the outside of the gloves. Consumer groups warn patients that they must demand cleanliness. If they see or suspect unsanitary conditions, they must tell someone immediately. It could be a matter of life or death. But, as one patient said, "No way! You don't tell your boss that he has bad breath, and you don't tell your doctor that he needs to wash his hands." Johnny asked Dottie how her first day in her Duarte ESL class was. It was terrible, she told him. She understood little of what the Level 4 teacher said. He spoke too fast for her. She had struggled through a Level 3 class at a Monrovia school. When the teacher asked if there were any questions, she told him that she didn't understand most of what he had said. He told her not to worry. She could take the class again if she failed it the first time. She didn't want to fail it the first time, however, or any time. He gave them homework the first day, of course. They were supposed to write a 300-word essay supporting gun control. Of course, Dottie said, she could write that essay in her native language, but there was no way she could write it in English. She showed Johnny the textbook. The print was so tiny that trying to read just a few pages gave her a headache. On top of that was all the new vocabulary on each page. "I'm gonna drop the class," she said. She wanted to cry. When was she ever going to learn this language? Tourists from around the world visit Hollywood. Buses take them past the Hollywood sign. At Grauman's Chinese Theater, they press their hands into the imprints of movie stars who long ago pressed their hands into wet cement. Tourists pause at the gold stars in the sidewalks with the movie stars' names on them. Buses drive past movie stars' houses. Tourists hope to see a star chatting with friends or tanning by the pool. Unfortunately, most of the houses are behind high hedges or down long winding driveways. Tourists are lucky to even see a chimney. And finally, tourists take pictures everywhere and with everyone. A popular picture opportunity in Hollywood is with movie characters like Chewbacca from Star Wars. However, Chewbacca might not be so popular anymore. Last week, outside Grauman's, Chewbacca gave two young female tourists a hard time. He kept trying to hug them as they took pictures of each other. The tour bus driver yelled at Chewbacca to leave the ladies alone. Chewbacca took off his headpiece, walked over to the driver, and head-butted him. The driver fell to the sidewalk. Someone called 911, and the cops came and arrested Chewbacca. Chewbacca was not apologetic. "Women come to America looking for Prince Charming, and here I am," he shouted to all. "I hope they leave him in jail," said a tourist who saw the whole incident. "That guy's an idiot." Nowadays, Geico is a well-known insurance company. For many years, however, it was unnoticed. Other companies, like Allstate and Farmers, were more popular. Then Geico tried something different. It got a new ad agency. The owner of the agency, Billy Ray Childers, was from Virginia. Years ago, he had tried to start his own agency in Manhattan, but when New Yorkers heard his southern accent, they gave him the cold shoulder. Angry, Billy Ray returned to Virginia. Someday, he hoped to teach those New Yorkers a lesson. He set up his new ad agency in Raleigh. Then he called up Geico headquarters in New York. He told them that they could improve their sales if they used a gecko to advertise Geico. They balked at first, but then approved his ad campaign. In the new commercial, the animated lizard said, "I'm a gecko, not a Geico." Geico was originally going to do one TV commercial with the bright green lizard and then retire it. But viewers, especially women, fell in love with the cute gecko, so Geico decided to do a few more commercials, and then a few more. The clever lizard with the British accent is now 8 years old and stars in a new commercial every several months. It has made Geico famous, almost as famous as the gecko itself. They say that Los Angeles is changing. In the past 2 weeks, a young woman was shot, and then her body was dropped off on a sidewalk and set on fire. This happened in broad daylight in a nice neighborhood. Another young woman's body was found lying in a dumpster. The decomposed body of another young woman was found in a park. An 8-year-old girl was standing with her mom in the kitchen when a bullet from a gang member's gun killed her. The little girl and her mom had just arrived in America. The gang member was shooting at other gang members in the street outside. A hospital van driver pushed a paraplegic out of the van onto a Skid Row sidewalk and drove off. A mentally ill patient in a nursing home was slapped repeatedly by a staff member. The staff member's buddy took a cell phone video of the assault. It showed the staffer laughing as the patient cried. A local TV station reporter went to a huge produce warehouse and filmed a worker urinating on a platform right next to boxes of fresh lettuce. Rats were shown walking throughout the warehouse and nibbling on the produce. Every day, this produce is distributed to hundreds of unsuspecting restaurants and supermarkets in Los Angeles. LA is changing all right, for the worse. It's a big country, but still, how can anything be left of Iraq? When you look at the news on TV, all you see is one explosion after another. Helicopters falling from the sky and vehicles flying into the sky. Suicide bombers committing homicide, and two deeply religious sects going at each other's throats. Iraqis are leaving the country as fast as they can, while terrorists are entering as fast as they can. About 30,000 Iraqi civilians are getting killed each year, while 2 million Iraqis have left their country since 2003. The U.S. government, which has caused most of this suffering, has not welcomed these Iraqi refugees into the USA. Less than 800 Iraqis have been allowed to enter this country since the war began 4 years ago. What is the reason for this small number? The Iraqi people are our friends. The U.S. government tried to rescue Iraqis from Saddam Hussein and bring them democracy. Now there is no Saddam, but also there is no democracy. In the future, there might even be no Iraq. Many people worldwide and many Iraqis think that Iraq was better off before Bush and Cheney decided to help. The local TV news showed a video of a man dressed in coveralls, a baseball cap, a long-sleeved shirt, and gloves. He was pointing a gun at the clerk. He reached over the countertop and grabbed money out of the cash register. Then he strolled out of the store. Since they outnumber Los Angeles police by about 1,000 to 1, criminals don't bother to run anymore. The video camera was mounted near the ceiling of the store, so its lens was looking down at the scene. You, as the viewer, could see the clerk clearly, but not the criminal. He was so bundled up that you couldn't see even the tip of his nose. Because there was no audio, you couldn't even be sure if the criminal was a man or a woman. Yet, the TV news announcer earnestly asked all the viewers, "If you have seen this robber, or if you know who he is, please call the LAPD." To be fair to the TV station, they showed the same useless video at least 6 times in 2 days. The LAPD got 0 phone calls. At other times, the TV newsreaders will give viewers a much better description. The suspect is about 5'8", 170 pounds. This description also results in no arrests. This traffic report is sponsored by Cerritos Auto Square. More people buy their car from Cerritos Auto Square than anywhere else in the world. KFWB News Time, 8:01, with traffic on the ones. A cleanup is still underway from a SIG alert in Commerce, northbound at Washington Boulevard. The right lane is closed, and also the Washington on-ramp is closed. They're mopping up from an earlier diesel fuel spill. We have several other problems out there right now. In Pasadena, some wooden boxes are in the number 1 lane on the eastbound 210 at Lake. Be on the lookout, because the faster you're going, the quicker you'll come up on them. Eastbound 60 in Santa Fe Springs, just before Grand Avenue, there's an accident. A couple of cars in the number 2 lane. Then in Pacoima, 118 westbound after San Fernando Road, an injury accident. A car went over the side. It's partly hanging over the side of the freeway. CHP and emergency crews are both on the way, so watch for activity on the right shoulder. In Vernon, 710 northbound before Bandini, watch for a broken-down car on the right shoulder. It's partly sticking into the right lane. A tow truck is en route. Finally, on the westbound 10 before Fairfax, there's a roll of carpet, a ladder, and a lawnmower in the number 3 and 4 lanes. This news report is sponsored by Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's some serious problems in Arkansas. High winds and a tornado have sliced through portions of southern Arkansas. People have been injured, and some residents are still unaccounted for. Emergency Coordinator Bob Holly says rescue workers are on the case. We had 2 ambulances set out first, and then when they saw the damage, that's when they called in the troops. Homes and businesses have been destroyed near a major highway at Dumas. A massive winter storm is sweeping through the plains and upper Midwest. It's dumped more than a foot of snow in northern Wisconsin. 7 people were killed on slippery roads, and 100,000 customers have no power in Iowa, Oklahoma, and Nebraska. Locally, police are trying to find a man who sexually assaulted a woman in Alhambra. She described the suspect as about 5'11", medium build, wearing blue jeans, a black jacket, black gloves, brown shoes, and a dark-colored ski mask covering his face. The woman was waiting for friends inside an apartment when the man entered through an unlocked door. He had a gun, sexually assaulted her, and then took her cell phone and left. The woman is in a local hospital. If you have seen this man, please call the Alhambra police. Finally, 1 person was killed when a high-speed train derailed near London. The cause is being investigated. Every Monday night, Felix checked the big blue container in the carport behind his apartment building. If the container was at least a third full, he would take it out to the street for pickup. Monday night, it was 2/3 full. He rolled it out into the street. The next day, he checked the container. It was still almost full of recyclables. That was odd, because all the other blue containers across the street were empty. He could tell because a couple of lids were open. He walked across the street to double-check. He wondered. Then he looked up his side of the street. There were 2 blue containers standing there. He walked about 120 feet up the street and lifted each lid. Both containers were empty. How could the truck have missed his container? He went upstairs to his apartment and called City Hall. They connected him to the Public Works Department. Susan said she would call Acme Trash to let them know about the missed container. On Wednesday, Felix checked the container again. It was still full, but the big green dumpster in the carport was missing. Apparently, the message that Susan sent to Acme Trash had been misunderstood. Acme picked up the big green dumpster, which had already been emptied on Tuesday, instead of the blue container. Felix left a message on Susan's answer machine saying to forget it. Then he went downstairs and pulled the almost full container back into its space in the carport. Let it sit there till next Tuesday, he told himself. Had he left another message, he was worried that his building would accidentally get dropped permanently off Acme's pickup list. Colleen was in a hurry, which made her driving even more careless than usual. Her boyfriend Simon had already criticized her many times for failing to stop completely at stop signs. That's what they call a California or rolling stop, he told her. "If the cops catch you sliding through a stop sign like that," he said, wagging a finger at her, "they'll give you a ticket for running a stop sign. That's a moving violation. That means at least $100 ticket plus 8 hours of driving school for another $30. I know, she replied, but I never do it when they're around, so how can they catch me?" Simon was about to tell her that cops have a habit of suddenly appearing out of nowhere, but Colleen told him to stop thinking so negatively. "You are bad luck," she said. "When you talk like that, you make bad things happen." He told her that life doesn't work that way. Colleen was in a hurry because she needed to drop off a package at the post office. It had to get to New York by Wednesday. She exited the freeway and pulled up at the stop sign. One car was in front of her. Colleen looked to the right and to the left. No cars were coming. It was safe to pull out. She hit the gas pedal. Bang! The car in front of her was still sitting there. The driver was a young woman who got out of her car, walked back to look at the damage to her new car, and started yelling at Colleen. "What were you waiting for?" Colleen demanded. Tina was going back to school for her third master's degree. She was a special education teacher, but she couldn't take her job anymore, so she had quit. The kids were out of control. There were too many of them in one classroom for her to manage effectively. The school administration ignored her pleas to add teacher assistants. They ignored her complaints that some of the kids were simply little monsters. They were discipline problems that other teachers had shunted off to special education. The administration didn't even respond to her complaint that one oversized young student had pushed her down one day onto the floor. Tina wanted to call the police, but the school principal talked her out of it with promises to improve things. 2 weeks later, not one promise had been fulfilled. Tina angrily visited the principal, who told her that if she didn't have the patience to wait for things to improve, maybe she wasn't cut out to be a teacher. "How dare you? The issue is not whether I am cut out to be a teacher," she angrily replied. "I am a teacher, and a darn good one. But no teacher can get along forever with inadequate supplies, with overcrowded classrooms, with students who are dumped into her class, and with students who attack her. And especially," she growled, "with idiots like you in charge who continually ignore the needs of special education students and teachers." Abigail and Jeremy got divorced about 10 years ago. Abigail did not want to see a lawyer, worried that it might turn ugly, so she talked to Jeremy, who agreed that it was a good idea to not use lawyers. He said not to worry, he would take care of her. She said she wasn't looking for a free ride. She could take care of herself. But, Jeremy insisted, he would help her out, then or whenever she needed money. It was the least he could do for her, since she was not taking 50% of his income and property. So Jeremy gave her $10,000 before they got divorced, because Abigail said that would be all she would need to finish getting her master's degree and start teaching. And that was it. For the next 10 years after getting her degree, Abigail worked as a teacher. She liked her job and the people she worked with. Unfortunately, a tornado wiped out the entire school and half the town. Many teachers got laid off. Abigail spent a month visiting family and friends, but then had to find a new job. She decided to change careers. To do so, she needed to go back to school for 2 years. Her tuition and living expenses would cost her $25,000. She called Jeremy. She and Jeremy had remained friendly over the years. "Jeremy, I need a big favor," she said over the phone. "Sure, Abby, you name it," Jeremy replied agreeably. Jeremy had a great job and a good life. She told him that she had been laid off, and she needed $25,000 for a degree and a new career. The friendliness left Jeremy's voice. She reminded him of his promise 10 years ago to help her out whenever she needed it. "Yeah, Abby, but that was 10 years ago. That's history now, right? Have you tried your local bank?" The biggest news in the whole world occurred 2 weeks ago when Paris Hilton was sentenced to 23 days in a Los Angeles jail. The heiress to the Hilton hotel fortune, who was a favorite of the paparazzi, had been cited for driving on a suspended license, among other things. When the judge decided that she must go to jail, people everywhere voiced their approval or disapproval. The news was on the radio, TV, and the internet. Why her situation was such worldwide news mystified almost everyone. After all, her only known value to society thus far had been her ability to party with one boyfriend after another, 1 week after another. As many said, she was famous for being famous, nothing more. When she finally went to jail, there must have been 100 photographers taking pictures of her. At first, the jail officials put her in a private cell, but her claustrophobia caused her to have panic attacks. They released her the next day. The following day, however, the judge ordered her back to jail to finish her sentence. The sheriff said she was treated like all the other prisoners. She ate bologna sandwiches and other nutritious food, just like the others. When she finally was released from jail at 12:01 a.m. on a Tuesday night, dozens of photographers again congregated around her to snap the perfect photo. She spent the first day relaxing and recovering at home in her parents' mansion. Then she went on the Larry King radio show and talked about her experience. She hadn't liked being in jail, she said, but it had turned her life around. She had found God, and now she was going to do all she could to help needy people improve their lives. Starting in February 2009, broadcasts of all TV signals will be digital, replacing current analog signals. For people who have cable or satellite TV, this is a non-issue because their reception will not be affected. But people who use rabbit ears or outside antennas won't be able to receive the new digital signals. They'll have to buy a converter for each TV, which will cost about $50 each. For Chris, that was too much. Instead, Chris was simply going to give his 2 TVs away to a thrift shop. Then he would wait until the prices went way down on digital tuner TVs and buy one when the price was right. He loaded the TVs into his car. The lady at the thrift shop wasn't interested at first. She changed her mind when he said that they were only 13-inch TVs and that they worked perfectly. He was relieved when she accepted them. Had she not, he would have had to deposit them at a hazardous waste facility, which meant waiting in line in his car for hours on end. Chris got home feeling good. Now he was going to enjoy at least a year of no TV. The idiot box was a good name for that waste of electricity. He felt like a new man for having got rid of his 2 TVs. When Donna called that night, he proudly told her the news. Donna, whose native language was Chinese, was not happy. "What do you mean you have no TV?" she yelled over the phone. "How are you going to teach me anything when I call to ask you about new vocabulary on the 11 o'clock news?" She had a few more things to say. Chris sighed. When she finished, he promised her he would buy a new digital TV the very next day. "Let's go to Walmart," Elizabeth told Kenneth. She wanted to buy some paint supplies. He suggested that they go to Home Depot instead because employees there could tell them exactly what to buy. After arriving there, Elizabeth found a friendly-looking worker who was momentarily free. "Excuse me," she said. "Could you help us?" She explained that she wanted to paint her office. "Neither me nor my husband knows how to do it, so please tell us the basics," she added. He smiled and told her that it was simple. All they needed were 2 gallons of white glossy paint, a roller, a tray and an insert to pour the paint in, and an extension handle to reach the high parts of each wall. "Don't we need primer?" Kenneth asked. "Oh, yes, of course. I was getting to that. If you don't put primer on first, the paint won't stick to the walls. Here are 2 gallons of good but inexpensive primer, and a brush would be a good idea for use in the corners and edges, and that should take care of it. Just put the primer on first, let it dry for a couple of hours, then put on 1 coat of paint, let it dry. Then, if you want to, put on another coat, but it shouldn't be necessary. As they were putting the items into the trunk, Kenneth told her they should buy a ladder, too. We're going to have to use the brush to paint up near the ceiling. The roller won't do in a corner, Kenneth said. We don't need a step ladder. I can sit on your shoulders, Elizabeth laughed. They went back inside and bought a step ladder. Cynthia and George went shopping together at Walmart. I need a water dispenser for my office, Cynthia told George. What do you mean by water dispenser? George asked. You know, one of those things that they put the big 5-gallon jug upside down into. Then you can pour yourself cold water using the blue handle or hot water using the red handle, Cynthia said. George tried to tell her that she had too few clients coming to her office to need such a dispenser. He told her to buy a case of bottled water. She could keep the bottles cold in the office refrigerator. Plus, she had a stove and a coffee maker in her office, so she could use either of them to produce hot water for her clients or herself. A contract with a water company is going to cost you at least $30 a month, he argued, and maybe you won't even be consuming that much water a month. Why don't you wait a few months and see how many clients you get, and then decide if a water dispenser is absolutely necessary. If it is, buy it then. There's no rush to buy it now. In addition, he argued, the trunk of her car was too small for the dispenser to fit into, nor would it fit into her back seat. So, end of argument, he concluded. They left Walmart. Cynthia dropped George off at his place and then drove back to Walmart. The dispenser was in a box that was almost the size of Cynthia, but she carted it out to the parking lot and managed somehow to get it into her trunk. That night, when George called, he asked, "You didn't go back to Walmart and buy that thing, did you?" "Of course not," she told him. Jim and Alicia had 2 dogs, Bugs and Bunny. They were both 15 years old. Bunny was dying. Bugs was still healthy. They were brother and sister and had been together since birth. They had never been separated for longer than a couple of hours. Jim and Alicia weren't sure what to do. The vet had told them that Bunny was in pain and might continue to suffer for as long as another year. This was unacceptable to both Jim and Alicia. So putting Bunny to sleep now instead of letting her suffer was not an issue. However, what to do about Bugs? The vet said Bugs was still healthy. He could last another 2 to 3 years. But how long, they wondered, would he last without his sister? Bunny had always been Bugs' big sister. She was confident and assertive. Bugs was rather timid. He didn't mind when his sister bossed him around. She was also there for him when he was feeling anxious. Bugs followed Bunny everywhere, and whenever Bunny decided to sleep, Bugs always curled up next to her, whether he was sleepy or not. Jim and Alicia both arrived at the same conclusion without very much discussion. When they took Bunny to the vet so that she could be put to sleep, Bugs went too. The Buick wouldn't start. Considering it was 15 years old, this shouldn't have been a surprise. But the battery wasn't that old. It was a die-hard, sold by Sears. Gerard had bought it 6 years ago, but it was a 100-month battery. It was fully guaranteed for the first 12 months and then prorated after that. Gerard called Sears. The service rep told him he would probably get $10 to $40 credit toward a new battery. Gerard wondered how there could be such a $30 range, but he didn't bother to ask. If the problem was electrical, he asked the service rep, what would Sears fix? The rep said Sears only replaced alternators and starters. If the electrical problem involved something else, Gerard would have to take it to the dealer. Gerard went out to pull the battery out of his car so he could recharge it overnight. Then he could hook the battery up the next day and use a meter to see if the electrical system was working properly. He opened the hood. He looked some more. Where was the battery? Had someone stolen it? He opened the manual. The manual said nothing about the location of the battery. He called up his friend Brian. Brian told him that he was looking in the wrong place. The battery was under the rear seat. Gerard scoffed. Nobody puts a battery under the rear seat, except Volkswagen, he told Brian. Well, it's got to be somewhere if it's not under the hood, Brian replied. Gerard went back out to the Buick and lifted up the rear seat. He found a few coins, some real old chewing gum, a paperback novel, and a watch battery, but no car battery. Enough was enough. Gerard called AAA's emergency road service. Before the tow truck driver towed the Buick to Sears, Gerard asked him if he knew where the battery was. "Oh, sure," he said. "It's under the hood, but you'd never know it because it's completely hidden by the big white plastic windshield washer reservoir." It was only a '93 Lincoln, but he loved it. Not a ding on it. Only 75,000 miles, even though it was 14 years old. The leather seats were like new, as was the headliner. All the bells and whistles worked, including the cruise control and the power seats and mirrors. It even got 14 miles per gallon. What was not to love? She hated it. She hated it because she thought he loved his car more than he loved her. "We can't go anywhere because all you do is worry about what will happen to your car," she complained. "The last time we went shopping, after an hour you stopped talking and listening to me. You had that long face. I knew what you were thinking about." "What was I thinking about?" he asked. "You were thinking about your Lincoln," she continued. "When we went out to the parking lot, you walked all around it to check for fresh dings. Then, when you saw none, you unlocked the car and got in. As usual, you didn't open the door for me because you were so busy adjusting the airflow out of the dashboard vents." "I just do that to make you feel comfortable," he said. "If you really want to make me feel comfortable," she said, "sell this car." Aaron asked Ray if he had looked everywhere for Walt's gift. Had he called up the wedding site to see if anything had been left behind? Ray said that he had looked everywhere and made a lot of calls that were fruitless. Ray didn't know what to do. If he sent Walt and Mary a thank-you note for a gift they hadn't given, they would be insulted. If he didn't send them a thank-you note for a gift they had given, they would be insulted. "What would you do?" Ray asked. Aaron said he would call Walt up and tell him the problem. "You can't go wrong with simply being honest," Aaron said. "Oh, yes you can," Ray countered. "Sometimes it's best to let sleeping dogs lie." But he thought about it and finally decided that honesty might be the best policy. He called Walt and told him the problem. Walt said that yes, he had given an envelope. In fact, the envelope contained $500 cash. $500? Ray asked. "That's a lot of cash, Walt." Walt admitted that it was, but he had gotten a fat raise early that year, and Ray's was the only wedding he'd been to in quite a while. Ray thanked him very much and apologized sincerely for someone stealing Walt's generous gift. Walt told him that it was only money. When Ray told Aaron about Walt's gift, Aaron laughed. "The only thief at the wedding was Walt. I quit playing cards with him last year because I caught him cheating, and it was only a $10 pot. I'm sure I told you about that." "Yes, you did tell me," Ray said. But of course he had to send Walt a thank-you note anyway. Melissa had heard about Bill. He was a womanizer. He dated one woman after another, telling one lie after another. He was a pilot, a tiger trainer, a banker, a publisher, a tycoon, an investor, an adventurer, and on and on. He laughed about how easy it was to deceive women. Dress sharp and drive a luxury car, and they would follow you anywhere. Bill could get almost any woman he wanted, and then he discarded them like so many empty water bottles. Although Bill owned a carpet cleaning business that had 5 employees, he made most of his money gambling. He went to Vegas at least 6 times a year and played at a couple of casinos in the Los Angeles area regularly. Tonight, he had invited himself to a monthly neighborhood poker game. For most of the evening, Bill was rather quiet. He hadn't said one unkind word about women, and he only briefly bragged about his poker skills. Melissa wondered if Bill had finally met a woman who had put him in his place. Meanwhile, he was winning every third hand. Melissa decided to play one last hand and then leave. She ended up with a wonderful hand, 3 nines and 2 aces. The betting was spirited, but eventually all the other players dropped out except Bill. Bill made a final raise, and Melissa called. There was almost $200 in the pot, the biggest of the evening. Melissa was mentally shopping with the money, much of it Bill's. Bill, however, also had a full house, 3 tens and 2 deuces. Bill chuckled. "The best female poker player in the world couldn't beat me, honey. What on earth were you thinking?" Edith wasn't getting any help from anyone. She had just taken the state realty exam, which was a lengthy multiple-choice exam in downtown Los Angeles. The testing room in the government building was freezing. As she hunched up shivering, she looked around and saw others feeling equally cold. Why couldn't these people let us know beforehand to bring jackets, she wondered. After getting the news that she had passed the test, she signed up with a realty company. They told her how much money she would owe them each month and wished her good luck. Other than that, they weren't much help or encouragement. They told her how to have open houses on weekends. She had to carry big signs in her car and place them in the neighborhood around the open house. The signs were not always easy to push into the ground, nor did they always stay upright. To make matters worse, one Saturday evening, she discovered that all of her signs had been stolen. Her realty company told her not to worry. They would just add the cost of replacing the signs to her monthly bill. After she had asked him many times, her husband finally accompanied her to an open house. They ended up spending 8 hours together with each other that Sunday. Only a dozen house hunters showed up all day. She tried to engage Edgar in conversation, but all he wanted to do was read the newspaper. After he helped her pick up all the signs, he told her that was the last time he was going to help her on an open house. She asked why. He said he didn't want to talk about it. Edith wondered how long her realty career was going to last. 2 bombing attempts in London failed last night. A Mercedes was parked in front of a popular nightclub before closing time. There were at least 500 patrons inside the club. The Mercedes contained 11 full gasoline cans and 7 containers of nails. Apparently, the car was to be exploded by a call from a cell phone, but someone or something goofed. The cell phone call didn't trigger the explosion. Instead, some smoke started spewing out of the car. An ambulance happened to drive by. The driver, seeing the smoke, called the police. The police arrived quickly, and a bomb expert immediately entered the car and started disarming the vehicle. A few minutes later, the police were notified about another car, also full of explosive material, parked behind the nightclub. That vehicle was also disarmed. Twice in one night, deadly explosions had failed to occur. The bad guys had lost, this time. A new prime minister had just taken over in England. He said that God was watching over London. Scotland Yard believed that terrorists were behind the bombing attempts. When one patron at the nightclub found out how close he had been to death, he said, "I'm so happy to be alive. Last night I was dancing all night near the windows next to the street, and I would have been one of the first to die. It's scary to think about. I won't be coming to this club for another week or so." Adam and Constance were very religious. Both had been raised in Catholic families, except for her Uncle Chandler, who was agnostic. All their relatives were devout Catholics. Adam's oldest brother was, in fact, a priest. Adam, as a youth, had been an altar boy and had prayed to God to become a priest. Instead, God made him a fireman. Constance had seriously thought about becoming a nun, but that was before she met Adam. Her heart fluttered at her first sight of Adam. He was taking pictures with kids at a charity event. What a big, strong man, she thought, and so good-looking. Constance took her nephew over to get his picture taken. She couldn't believe it when she saw that Adam was wearing a St. Christopher medal around his neck. "He's Catholic, too," she marveled. Not being a shy woman, Constance started up a conversation with Adam. One thing, as they say, led to another. Both sets of parents were so happy that their child had fallen in love with a Catholic. There was a huge wedding at the cathedral. Adam's brother married the two lovebirds. Everyone said it was the best wedding ever. When Adam and Constance got around to opening their gifts a few days later, Constance opened an envelope from her Uncle Chandler. In it was $100 cash. But the cash was inside a Jewish card for Happy Hanukkah. The note in the card was, "I couldn't find a wedding card that I liked. I know this is Jewish, but it really is a beautiful card, don't you think? Love and best wishes." Constance did not send her uncle a thank you note, nor did she ever talk to him again. She was unable to think about her wedding again without thinking about that card. "Why don't you ever take me out to dinner?" Ginger screamed. "All my girlfriends go out to dinner with their boyfriends at least once a week. They go to nice restaurants and they have a good time. Then they call me up the next day and brag about what a nice time they had. They make me sick. And so do you, you cheapskate." This was not the first time she had had this conversation with Barney. He replied, "How many times have I told you that I don't trust restaurant food? All you have to do is watch these specials on TV news occasionally to see what's going on in the kitchen. When you see how the cooks don't wash after using the bathroom, how they sweat into your food while it's cooking, how they touch every bite of your food with their hands, and who knows what else you don't see, then you'd agree with me." "You exaggerate," she yelled. "Not all restaurants are like that, only a few." He told her that even a few was one too many for him. "Well, one more week without going to a restaurant is going to be one too many for me, Buster," she warned. "Lester takes Heidi out 3 times a week. She has the life." Okay, Barney surrendered. He promised to take her out that Friday night to the best sushi place in town. The next evening, Ginger's best friend called. "Did you hear about Heidi? She almost died," she wailed. Heidi was still in the hospital. She had been taken to the emergency room that morning because of the bad scallops she had eaten at the most exclusive restaurant in Pasadena the night before. Zach drove over to his fiancée's place. She was in China visiting her parents. Her son Bradley hadn't gone with her. Bradley was a junior in high school. He neither liked nor disliked Zach, even though he had known Zach for 3 years. Zach was still trying to win Bradley over. He called Bradley to tell him that he was coming over. Bradley said okay. When Zach got there, He checked all of Christine's mail to see if there were any bills to pay. There were none. He asked if Bradley wanted to drive Zach's car. Bradley had a driver's permit and was always pestering his mom to let him drive her car. Bradley said all right. Zach told him not to speed, but he could drive anywhere he wanted. Bradley got on the 210 freeway and headed northwest to where it meets the 5. Zach gave Bradley a few driving tips. Don't drive next to big rigs, because you never know when they might tip over and crush you. Don't drive behind pickup trucks with loads, because you never know when something in the truck will get airborne and come flying through your windshield. On their way back, Zach suggested that they stop at the driving range. He wanted to show Bradley how to play golf. Bradley wasn't enthusiastic. He preferred his video games. But Bradley soon discovered that golf was fun. He hit a large bucket of balls. Zach told him that he had a natural swing. The next day, Bradley, for the first time ever, called Zach. He had a few blisters on his hands. Zach said that was normal. Then Bradley asked if Zach would come by next Saturday so they could take a drive and hit golf balls again. Zach said of course, with a happy feeling in his heart. Senator Earl Adams recently admitted that he had been having sex with prostitutes. He claimed, however, that he actually wasn't having sex with them. He was just talking to them. But he did admit that he wore diapers during some of those conversations. When the senator got wind that a newspaper was going to reveal his shortcomings, he called a news conference. Apparently, he figured that by confessing instead of getting caught, he would be forgiven faster. The senator announced that God would forgive him because he understands that senators need to relieve their stress somehow. In a 1998 magazine interview, his wife said that Adams was as faithful as a puppy dog. She added, however, that if she ever did catch him cheating, she would divorce him. In 1999, Adams told CNN that President Clinton should resign because of his affair with Monica. He was unfit to remain in public office after his shameful behavior. Senator Adams, however, said he would remain in office. To resign would be to let down the people who had voted for him. His wife announced that she loved him and would stand by her man. The U.S. Senate contains 100 of the most powerful people in the United States. They are elected because of their integrity, intelligence, and leadership. Yet here is a senator who regularly cheats on his wife, who doesn't realize that an escort service keeps phone records, and who dresses in baby clothes. The man is a joke, but he will have the last laugh when the good people of California re-elect him. Once a week, Neil went grocery shopping. He always made a list, but he always forgot to put one or more items on the list. This used to anger him, but now he just accepted it. "You're not as sharp as you used to be," he told himself. It was Friday, shopping day. He went to the 99-cent store. Sometimes they had a lot of fresh produce. Sometimes they didn't. He got lucky. There were fresh, packaged broccoli, celery, eggplant, and squash. Also, packages of peaches, plums, and apples. He easily had enough produce to last all week if it didn't rot first. The produce alone filled up 4 plastic bags. 4 other bags contained other items that were on Neil's list. He drove to Albertsons, which sold milk by the gallon and at cheaper prices than the 99-cent store. Interestingly, the price of milk had soared in the last month. He used to buy 2 gallons of non-fat milk for $3.59. Now he was paying $4.69. Yet the news media was silent. The same news media that reports a 2-cent increase in gasoline prices or even a 1-cent decrease. That's all over the news. Milk, he thought, just isn't sexy enough. He parked his car in the carport and opened the trunk. Somehow he managed, as usual, to put all 10 plastic bags into his hands and lug them upstairs. What a drag shopping is, he thought, and then he mentally slapped himself. If you think it's a drag now, wait till you can't drive. Wait till you can't even walk up the stairs unless you use a cane. How are you going to get your groceries then? The older you get, he told himself, the more you'd better appreciate the fact that you can still do all these boring chores and errands. Jasper's parents were going to Las Vegas for a week. The last time they were there was 10 years ago. The city had changed greatly in those 10 years. For one thing, the all-you-can-eat buffets were $15 instead of $3, and traffic was much worse, of course. But now, Las Vegas had a monorail that stopped at all the major hotels. No more walking in the hot sun or the bitterly cold wind if you visited Las Vegas in the winter. Jasper's dad loved the buffets. Even at $15, he'll still eat $20 or $30 worth. Jasper's mom said. Jasper asked his dad what games he was going to play. Blackjack, he replied, if he could find a $2 table. Jasper told him that he might have to go downtown to a real old casino. Most casinos, he said, require a $5 minimum nowadays. That didn't surprise his dad. After he lost $100, he was finished anyway, he said. He was never one to throw good money after bad. Jasper's mom had no use for anything except slot machines. She loved the slots, as long as she could find nickel machines and dime machines. Are any of those left? She asked Jasper. He said he wasn't sure, but there had to be some, somewhere. She said she was going to play differently on this visit. She would wait till someone used a machine for at least 15 minutes. Then she would play that machine when that person got up and left. Maybe, she hoped, the jackpot would hit on the first nickel that she put in. That's a good idea, Jasper thought. Unfortunately, it's the same trick that everyone who plays the slot machines does, and almost everyone goes home broke. It can be a lonely, depressing job. Not for the successful realtors, of course. Their job is almost glamorous. Some of them, the most successful, work with wealthy people who live in, buy, and sell beautiful houses in beautiful neighborhoods. But for a new realtor, life is hard. A realtor has to pass a comprehensive test and then take continuing education credit classes annually. He or she has to join a realty company and attend meetings regularly. He has to spend hours on the computer researching the latest properties that are being offered for sale. He has to make cold calls to potential clients. These cold calls are uncomfortable for the realtor and annoying to potential clients. Once a realtor gets a client, he must chauffeur the client from one property to another, patiently explaining this and that while answering questions about these and those. It's always a contest between the seller trying to get as much as he can for his house and the buyer trying to pay as little as he can for the same house. Neither one wants to give in. On top of it all, the seller often lies, proclaiming that there are no problems with his house. No, sir, absolutely none whatsoever. The realtor has to put up with the seller's lies and the buyer's cries of poverty, and in the end, he hears these same words from the buyer. I don't know. Let me think about it. The sinks were leaking. David looked in the local paper and saw an ad for Toby the handyman. David left a message on the answering machine. 2 days later, he called again. He told Toby that he had left a message 2 days ago. Toby apologized. He said he hadn't checked his messages in a couple of days. David felt like hanging up. Why was it so hard to find a worker who was responsible and clean? Many workers were slobs who left messes for the homeowner to clean up. Toby doesn't check his machine, David mused. David told Toby that the kitchen, bathroom, and laundry room faucets were leaking. Toby said he could come over on Friday. Each faucet would cost $20. If he had to buy any parts, that would be extra. David was pleased. $60 was a great price. Of course, if Toby fixed faucets like he checked his messages, maybe the deal wouldn't be so good. Then again, it was only a $60 risk. David asked Toby if a check was okay. Toby said no, he only accepted cash. David said that was okay, as long as he got an invoice. Toby said he would be over Friday at 1 p.m. At 3 p.m., David left a message on Toby's machine asking where he was. At 3:30, Toby showed up. David asked if he had brought an invoice. "Oh, gee, I forgot." "I'm sorry," Toby said. David shook his head in disbelief. But since Toby was there, he decided to let him in. Before Toby walked into David's house, he wiped his feet very carefully on the mat. David noticed that. Maybe Toby will work out just fine, he thought. Wally asked Anita how her daughter Heather was doing. Heather had always been a dutiful, loving daughter. She got married about 10 years ago, at the age of 23. It was the first marriage for her and her husband, Ben. And they had 2 kids. Everything seemed fine, even though Heather was the only one working. Ben had gotten laid off 2 years ago. He was still looking for work. They were fortunate because Heather's grandma loved her to death. She had bought a house for Heather as a wedding gift, so Ben and Heather had no mortgage to pay, not 1 penny. Grandma asked only that Heather call her twice a month. Recently, Grandma had asked Anita what was wrong with Heather. Anita said she didn't understand. Nothing was wrong. Then why hasn't she called, Grandma asked. Anita said she would talk to Heather. She left several messages, but Heather didn't call back. Anita drove over to the house. Ben was home taking care of the kids. "Where's Heather?" Anita asked. "She went to the beach," Ben told her. "Without you and the kids?" Ben was reluctant to talk, but he did. Heather had started smoking again. Even worse, she had found a boyfriend. She had met this guy at work, and things got out of hand. Ben didn't know what to do. If he filed for divorce, he might be out on the street with 2 kids to support. If he didn't get a divorce, he had to live with the humiliation of being supported by a wife who was cheating on him. Anita was astounded at her daughter's selfish actions. She drove home and called her mom. Grandma said that hopefully it was just a phase that Heather was going through. She told Anita to make sure to remind Heather to call. It was their first vacation together in years. Meg and Oscar had been running their own jewelry business for years. They made a nice income, but they were busy all the time. They went to one trade show after another, flying throughout the U.S. and often to China and other countries. Their last vacation was at least 10 years ago. Recently, Oscar's doctor said that Oscar's high blood pressure was going to be the death of him. After questioning Oscar about his eating and exercise habits, he concluded that Oscar was stressing himself out at work. He told Oscar that he needed to stop and smell the roses more often. In short, he said, "I'm writing you a prescription for 2 weeks of R&R, rest and relaxation, immediately. In fact, I want you to take off 4 weeks a year, and these must be non-working vacations. No cell phone, no laptop. Do you understand me? In case you don't, I'm telling Meg too. You might not listen to me, but you will listen to her." Meg canceled all their activities for the 2 weeks at the end of July. Fortunately, they did not have any flights scheduled. She booked them a nice hotel near Palm Springs. "We'll catch up on our magazines, newspapers, and TV reruns," she told Oscar. "We won't even talk about work for 2 weeks, okay? We'll relax in the pool, get massages, and treat ourselves like royalty. Got it?" "Yes, ma'am," Oscar said, smiling as he saluted her. The hotel had failed to tell them that it was undergoing renovations, but when it offered everything at half price, Meg and Oscar stayed. The second morning, about 10, Oscar told Meg he was going to take a swim. She told him not to forget his sunblock. She went back to sleep. When she woke up at noon, she put on her swimsuit and went outside. She couldn't stop screaming when she saw Oscar submerged beneath the water. His foot had gotten caught in a suction vent that workers had not covered properly. He had been underwater for 10 minutes. A month after the funeral, back home, Meg was going through her mail. The hotel, apparently worried about a lawsuit, had sent her an offer to stay there free for a month. The congenial letter suggested that she bring a friend. 12 people in British Columbia experienced a disastrous balloon ride when it accidentally caught fire. The balloon was still tied to the ground when the fire started. 3 people jumped out immediately and safely, but the ropes securing the balloon burnt through and the basket started rising. 7 more people jumped out as quickly as they could, but each one jumped from a higher height. The last 2 jumped from almost 50 feet up. Their clothes were on fire. They survived, but both would be in the hospital for several months, according to officials. The others escaped with broken bones and first and second degree burns, but nothing critical. Officials said that another balloon fire, causing no deaths and only minor injuries, had occurred only a week earlier. The 2 balloon riders who failed to jump out were a married couple celebrating their 50th anniversary. Their oldest son had surprised them with this champagne flight as a gift. The couple burnt to death in the basket, which ascended to about 500 feet. Then the entire balloon burst into flames and plummeted to the ground, landing in a trailer park. The basket was still burning furiously. It looked like an orange torch as it descended, brilliant against the blue sky. 4 trailers were destroyed by the bomb-like effect of the basket's heavy landing. When the dust finally cleared, the married couple were found completely charred, embracing each other. A professional football player was charged by government prosecutors with breeding dogs to fight, providing the site for the dog fights, gambling on the dog fights, and killing dogs that were not good fighters. The quarterback, Roger Chaney, at first denied everything. He told the media that he hoped his mother would not hear about any of this, and if she did, she knew him well enough not to believe any of the charges. Unfortunately, all the people that worked for him immediately confessed everything, hoping for reduced sentences. They all pointed a finger at the quarterback. The media interviewed Chaney's father, who said that he had told his boy that dogfighting was evil and he should stop it. His son told him that it was only some dogs. It wasn't like he was destroying lions or elephants. He told me that humane societies destroy thousands of dogs a month, so what was the big deal? Cheney's dad said. 2 weeks after the initial charges were made, Cheney agreed to plead guilty to several reduced charges, including animal cruelty. He could be sentenced to 5 years in jail. Across the nation, football fans and animal fans were equally outraged at his admission. Athletes are supposed to be a model for our nation's youth, said some. He is more of an animal than any of his poor dogs, said others. Few were surprised or saddened when the National Football League suspended Cheney without pay for an undisclosed term. 6 coal miners in Utah were trapped 1,500 feet underground when the support beams collapsed. Digging was immediately started in an effort to rescue the 6. 5 volunteer miners risked their lives to descend down to the location of the cave-in. A day later, another cave-in occurred, killing 3 of the 5 would-be rescuers. All 5 were pulled out of the mine. The government banned any further attempts at rescue by men. Instead, machines would be used to burrow into the ground. Listening devices would be able to detect any human activity, and probes would be able to detect the amount of oxygen present. Even though most people figured that the original 6 had died almost immediately, 5 more holes were dug during the next 2 weeks in an effort to find and deliver food and water to survivors. This effort was made more difficult because searchers did not know the exact location of the original cave-in. After the 4th, 5th, and 6th digs had produced no positive results, the owner of the mine said that was it. Enough was enough. He had done all he could do, and after 2 weeks of no food and water, it was impossible that anyone could still be alive. The families of the 6 miners were outraged, telling the media that the owner had given only lip service to rescue attempts. They planned to sue. She was a big, homely, overweight young woman, in her late 20s maybe. No ring on her finger, so she was probably single. In fact, judging from her unfriendly demeanor, she probably had no boyfriend, and unless she started dieting and exercising regularly, she would probably remain unattached. Vivian asked her to make sure to remove the plastic tag from each article of clothing that Vivian was buying at Marshall's. The woman looked at Vivian but said nothing. Not, "Yes, ma'am," not, "Of course," not, "No problem." She yanked each shirt off its hanger, removed each tag, and folded each shirt quickly but carelessly. Even though the building was air-conditioned, her forehead had beads of sweat. Occasionally she wiped the sweat off with the back of her hand. When she finished removing all the plastic tags and folding shirts into 3 piles, she rang up the total, $530.78. Vivian presented her Visa card. The clerk completed the transaction and gave Vivian the receipt to sign. Then she started to put all 19 shirts into one big bag. Vivian said, "No, please put them into 3 bags because that would be easier to carry back out to the car." The young woman made a sour face, as if she had been asked to lick the floor clean. She almost threw each pile of shirts into 3 separate plastic bags. Vivian said thank you and picked up the bags. The young woman said nothing. Wordlessly, she wiped the sweat off her forehead, pulled a shirt off the hanger for the next customer, and folded it. Every 2 years, DMV sent Corey a notice to get a pollution check to make sure his Cadillac wasn't fouling the California sky. Corey thought that DMV was fighting a losing battle, considering that there were 30 million cars and 10 million cows in California, not to mention the air pollution drifting into California from across the Pacific. After driving on the 210 freeway for 20 minutes to warm the engine up, Corey drove to the test-only center on Colorado Boulevard. Sam, the owner, offered Corey a bottle of purified water. Sam pulled the car up to the test machine and stuck the machine's sensor up the car's tailpipe. This isn't good, Corey thought. Sam showed Corey the printout. Your vehicle is a gross polluter. What does that mean? Corey asked. It meant that Corey had to take his car to a mechanic to find out why the car was running so rich. It was using gasoline inefficiently. Maybe that's why I'm getting only 8 miles per gallon, Corey thought. Sam said that once the problem was fixed, bring the car back for a second test, which would be free. Corey took his car to Mo, his regular mechanic. Mo said he couldn't help Corey, but his friend Ramsey specialized in emission problems. He gave Corey Ramsey's business card. Tell him that I recommended you, Mo said. Ramsey said to bring the car by 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. First come, first served. Corey got there at 7:40 a.m. Monday. There were 3 cars already parked there, but Corey was relieved to discover that they were the mechanic's cars. He was the first customer. Ramsey introduced himself, saying, "Coffee will be ready in a few minutes. I'll show you the waiting room." He was a friendly, courteous man. Corey felt comfortable. Mo had sent him to a good place. Nicholas was sitting in the waiting room Monday morning. He had brought 4 magazines with him in case the mechanics had to spend all day fixing his car. His portable Sony radio was on, and one earbud was stuck in his right ear. A customer came into the waiting room. Nicholas overheard the customer talking to Harold, the service representative. The customer was from Milford, the same little town that Nicholas was from. After the customer and Harold had finished talking, Harold went back outside. Nicholas thought he would introduce himself. He said, "I heard that you are from Milford." The young man nodded. "Are you going to the parade on Wednesday?" Nicholas asked. "What parade?" the man asked. Wednesday was the 4th of July. Nicholas wondered if he was talking to someone who just happened to be visiting Earth on his way to Pluto. "Didn't you say you live in Milford?" Nicholas asked. The man nodded. "How long have you lived there?" Nicholas asked. 5 years, the man replied. "And you've never been to the 4th of July parade?" Nicholas asked. The man shook his head. He seemed totally uninterested in continuing the conversation, although all he was doing was watching cars drive by on the nearby street. "Oh well, I tried to be neighborly," Nicholas thought, as he put the earbud back in his ear and opened one of his magazines. Martin and Jane were shopping. They were in Ross Dress for Less. They had just bought shirts, pants, skirts, and tops that filled up 4 plastic bags. Martin picked up all 4 bags. Jane said there was no need to do that. "Why not?" he asked her. "We can just put everything into a Ross cart and roll it out to the car," she suggested. "We can't do that," he replied. "These carts are for in-store use only. You can't walk all over the mall with their carts. Let's just carry these bags out to the car, put them into the trunk, and then we can continue to shop." They no sooner walked out the door of Ross than they saw about 50 rental shopping carts locked to a rail. "See?" Martin pointed out to Jane. "If you want to use the cart, you can just rent one for the whole day from the rack." The mall was huge, and it was air-conditioned. Both of them were chilly. "When we get back to the car, let's grab our jackets," Jane suggested. As soon as they walked outside, the blast of summer heat hit them. Once at the car, they put the bags into the trunk. Then they plopped down into the front seats. They were both tired from all the walking they had just done. When they felt more refreshed, they locked the car and walked back to the mall entrance. "Wait a minute," Jane said. They stopped. Jane told Martin about the two suspicious characters sitting outside the entrance. "They were watching us as we carried the bags out to the car," she said. "You have very sharp eyes," Martin said. They went back to their car. Martin drove around to the other side of the mall, and they parked in the area marked 6. "Happy birthday! This is your dad calling," Dad said. Dad always identified himself, as if, after 60 years, Joel didn't recognize his own dad's voice. "Well, you're getting pretty old, aren't you?" Dad asked. "I sure am," Joel said. "In fact, I'm the same age you were 20 years ago." "Yes, who'd ever think that they wished they were 60 again," said his dad. "This aging process is certainly no fun." "You can say that again," Joel said. "But as they say, it's a lot better than the alternative, as long as you're reasonably healthy in mind and body." They both agreed. His dad and mom were still quite active. They lived together in their house. They both drove. They both played golf regularly and were active volunteers in the community. But such independence would not last forever. Both of them would eventually need part-time or full-time nursing assistants at home, or maybe even have to be moved into a nursing home. What a quiet end that will be, Joel thought, to such fun, productive, and eventful lives. Lying in a bed in a nursing home, waiting for relatives and friends to come visit. Waiting for the nurse's aide to bring medication, dinner, or an extra blanket. Waiting for help to use the bathroom. Much of that time spent waiting would also be spent in thought. What do people think about when they know their time is almost up? Joel wondered. A 58-year-old woman, mother of 3, grandmother of 8, was shot twice in the head Friday night. She was driving to the Walmart east of Pasadena. Only a block from her home, she saw 2 kids spray painting graffiti on a new building. She honked at the kids. They continued to tag the building. She honked again. Then she got out of her car and started yelling at them to stop it. They turned around and shouted obscenities at her. She got back into her car, telling the boys that she was calling the police. She did not notice another car behind her. The car pulled up next to her. The passenger window rolled down, and 2 shots were fired. The 2 boys, who had been watching, walked over to the woman's car. One opened the driver's door and grabbed her purse. The other opened the passenger door and dug through the glove compartment. Then they calmly got into their friend's car and left the scene. It is said, if good people are silent, evil will win. This woman was not silent, yet evil won. The police caught a 19-year-old who they think fired the shots. He will be tried. If convicted, he will go to prison for 20 years, where he will get free food, housing, and medical care, and where he'll learn how to commit other crimes. But because the prisons are so overcrowded, he will probably get out in 10 years. So, at the age of about 30, he will be out committing more crimes, while 3 children and 8 grandchildren will never get to grow older with their grandma. For bravely speaking up, she was put down. People say that what goes around comes around. But how often does that happen to cold-blooded murderers? A woman is standing at a bus stop at noon. A van pulls up. A young man hops out of the van, grabs the woman's purse, gets back into the van, and it drives off. An elderly man is standing on the sidewalk in front of his home at 10:30 p.m. He is admiring the full moon. A car pulls up right in front of him and stops. Two men get out. One man punches the old man in the mouth. The other man takes the man's wallet out of his pants. They get back into their car and drive off. A woman puts her laptop and purse into her car in her driveway at 3:15 p.m. She starts the car and then remembers that she forgot to turn off the TV. She goes back into her house, turns off the TV, and comes back to her car. Her purse and her laptop are gone. The Department of Transportation built an elevated freeway on top of the 110 freeway in Los Angeles. The new freeway is supported by more than 100 thick concrete columns. Since the freeway was built, each column has been tagged with graffiti and repainted at least 10 times. Late one night, someone managed to raise a heavy metal shopping cart to the top of a flagpole outside a supermarket. The next morning, a 56-year-old supermarket worker hooked up the U.S. flag and started to raise it by pulling on the rope. A second later, the cart crashed down on her. She was permanently paralyzed. When released from the hospital, she told a TV reporter that she forgave the culprit. "Please don't do this again," she said. "You might kill someone, and that would be terrible." A police spokesman admitted that they might not ever find the prankster. No one knows for sure, but some experts estimate that half of the crimes committed in the U.S. go unreported. Half of those reported never result in the criminal being found. Half of those in which the criminal is found never result in convictions. Half of the convictions result in reduced or full sentences. Half of the full sentences eventually become reduced sentences because of good behavior or overcrowded prisons that result in early releases. "The problem," said Wyatt Earp, a retired police officer, "is that punishment is not swift enough or severe enough. All they get is a slap on the wrist. Too many judges are soft on criminals. We need to change the law so that there is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Even criminals understand physical pain. If I were president, I would do many things to teach these punks a lesson. Prisons would have no heat and no air conditioning. Let the jerks freeze in the winter and bake in the summer. They would get one peanut butter and jelly sandwich for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. This way, we don't have to worry about prisoners using utensils to injure guards or other inmates or dig out of prison. And no crunchy or organic peanut butter either, only the cheap stuff. Their only beverage would be water, no soda, milk, coffee, or tea, and no fancy bottled water either. Their water would be straight from the faucet. Visitors to Disneyland in Southern California see lots of life-sized cartoon characters such as Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Pluto the dog. Most parents take their small kids right up to these characters. If the child doesn't start bawling, because he or she is afraid of the cartoon character, the parents will take snapshots or videos of their kid with Snow White, Grumpy, Goofy, or others. Often the camera will be rolling even when the child looks afraid or is crying. Last week, Eva Gunderson took her 7-year-old son Billy Bob to Disneyland. Pluto was the first character they met once they got inside. Eva asked Billy Bob if he wanted a picture with Pluto. Billy Bob said no. He said Pluto's tail was too skinny and his nose was too big. Eva told him to go ahead, please, just so she could show Daddy. Billy Bob reluctantly agreed. He went over to Pluto and sat on his lap. Eva said, "Say cheese," and both Billy Bob and Pluto said the magic word. Then, as Billy Bob got off Pluto's lap, he grabbed Pluto's round black plastic nose and ripped it off Pluto's costume. Pluto yelled, "Ouch!" even though it didn't hurt. Billy Bob started running, and Pluto started chasing him. Just as Pluto got close enough to grab him, Billy Bob kicked Pluto between his legs. Pluto fell to the ground, groaning. This time he really was in pain. Eva got it all on video cam. "That was great, honey," she told her son as they walked off to find more characters. "Wait till Daddy sees this. He'll be so proud of you." A new invention called Arm Yourself is in arcades in Japan. It is a mechanical arm wrestling machine. In the old days, fairs and carnivals usually had a test your strength contest that required a player to swing a small sledgehammer as hard as he could to ring a bell and get a prize. The Japanese invention also challenges a player's strength. Players can set it to 4 different levels: baby, girl, man, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. The mechanical arm operates at half strength for the first 10 seconds. Baby, for example, would be half baby or 50% full strength for 10 seconds initially. This gives the human time to evaluate his mechanical opponent and usually allows him to win, says the inventor. But after 10 seconds elapse, the mechanical arm instantly achieves full strength so that weak baby suddenly becomes strong baby. That comes as a surprise to the human, said the inventor. If you watch the human compete, you will see a look of surprise come over his face at the machine's sudden burst of strength. It's funny to see. Unfortunately for some players, the look of surprise is followed by the look of pain as the steel and plastic arm breaks their flesh and blood arm. 2 players recently went to the hospital. The inventor said that he wouldn't put a warning sign on the machine. "It's not the machine's fault," he said. "Humans often think that they're smarter, faster, and stronger than they actually are. I think it's a good lesson that they are learning. Many refuse to combat the machine at the baby or girl level because they think that they're equal to the man or Arnold level. They don't know their limitations. They're proud and foolish, and some of them have to pay the price for their pride." Semper Fi means always faithful. It's the motto of the Marine Corps, which is a segment of the U.S. Navy. The Marines do whatever the federal government tells them to do, and the government always talks about how important the Marines are and how grateful the government is. So when a former Marine, James Reed, recently applied for a Purple Heart for a wound that he received while serving in the Korea War more than 50 years ago, He expected no problems, but a Navy official said that they had no more Purple Hearts. If Reed wanted one, he could buy it at a military supply store. "They're only $42, said Arthur Chertoff. "It's not exactly like buying a new car." However, the 75-year-old Reed subsists on a military pension that barely covers his rent. His daughter and son send him money for food, transportation, and other expenses. "Well then, let your kids pay for it," Chertoff said when Reed told him that he depended on his kids for living expenses. So Reed asked his son for $42 for the medal. His son got so upset about the ungratefulness of the Navy that he called the local newspaper. The local newspaper printed a front-page article about how the Navy couldn't be bothered to pay for and present Reed his Purple Heart 50 years after his injury. Network television news picked up the story. The Navy, of course, was immediately embarrassed. Somehow, officials found the money and the time to buy Reed his Purple Heart and even make a ceremonial presentation. "We are always eager and happy to show that we take care of our own," said the broadly smiling Chertoff as he presented Reed the medal in front of TV news cameras. "Thank you so much for your service to your country." It sounds incredible, but the small country of Greece seems to be burning down. Police believe arsonists are responsible for at least half of the fires. 30 people have died so far, many of them trapped in their homes or their cars. Residents all over Greece have called fire departments, police, and media about fires surrounding their homes, but there have simply not been enough firemen to respond to all these fires. The government has asked for aid from France, Italy, and Germany. Greek ruins that are almost 3,000 years old are in danger of being burnt down. Fires surround Athens, the capital city. The hillsides are ablaze, and there seems to be no end in sight. Entire villages have been destroyed. There has been no rain for 2 months, and the trees are so dry that just the heat from an approaching fire causes them to explode into flames. Police have arrested 3 suspected arsonists. One suspect, oddly enough, was still complaining about the 2004 Olympics. He had applied to carry the torch into the stadium and light the fire to officially start the games. His application was ignored. "You have to be somebody," was the reply he got when he called the Olympic Committee in Athens. "And you're not. You're nobody," an official told him. The man was in jail for 3 years for trying to blow up the committee's headquarters. Yesterday, police caught him walking away from a new fire with an empty gas can in his hands. "I'm nobody, huh?" he told the police. "Well, I'm somebody now." I was sound asleep. My grandfather appeared in a dream. He asked why I had never visited him and Grandma at the cemetery. He said that even my mom hadn't visited since October 4th, Grandma's birthday. He told me that when I was young, I had walked out into a pond and slipped underwater. He had rescued me. He said Grandma was supposed to be watching me, but that she had gotten sick all of a sudden and was throwing up. It was probably the fresh blackberries they had picked and eaten earlier. Grandma had a bad stomach. My parents were out on a boat in the pond. They did not know that Grandpa had saved me until they got back to shore. I was in a towel, and my clothes were drying on bushes. My brown and white Buster Brown shoes were also soaked. I was only 3 years old, Grandpa said. My parents were angry at first, but when they saw that Grandma was still feeling sick, They forgave her. Grandpa told me that we had a picnic after that. The four of us ate some chicken, potato salad, and homemade cookies. We drank lemonade. Then Grandpa took me for a walk in the woods. I sat on his shoulders. I saw some daisies, and we picked them. When we returned, I presented 3 daisies to Mom and 3 to Grandma, who was finally feeling better. Grandpa said to bring some daisies to the grave site. Then I woke up. The next day, I called my mom. Do you remember me walking into the pond and Grandpa rescuing me? My God, who told you about that? You mean it really happened? Yes, but your father and I never told you about it because Grandma swore us to silence. Even though it wasn't her fault, she felt that she had failed in her responsibility and never wanted you to know about it. My goodness, that was so long ago. Who told you this? Mom, did I go for a walk with Grandpa and return with daisies for you and Grandma? Okay, I get it. You and your dad are playing some kind of prank. Okay, it's very funny. Now quit it. This is no prank, Mom. Grandpa told me this in a dream last night. It still sounds like a prank. No, I'm serious. He told me that Grandma had a reaction to blackberries. He said I was wearing brown and white Buster Brown shoes. He said I gave you and Grandma daisies. Oh my God, your father would never remember all this. It must be Daddy. Did he say anything about visiting his grave site? Yes, that was his problem. He wanted me to visit them. He also said that you had not visited since Mom's birthday 6 years ago? Well, not... I've got to get over there right now. Wait for me. I'm coming with you, and I've got to bring those daisies. Maybe we'd better start going every year, huh, Mom? Yes. There's no telling what Grandpa might tell you next time. Roy wanted to visit Egypt 2 years ago, but while he was checking out different tour packages, an airplane crashed into the Atlantic. The plane was an Egypt Air flight from New York to Cairo. It had no sooner gotten airborne than it dove straight down into the ocean, killing all on board. There was a great deal of investigation into the crash, but the final conclusion, made after recovering the black box, was that the co-pilot had decided to take his life along with all the passengers and crew. Pat told Roy to forget about flying to Egypt. As his wife of 50 years, she wouldn't permit it. If he wanted to see the pyramids, she said, he could rent a video or Google the pyramids online. 2 years went by, and no further crashes occurred. One day Roy told Pat that he was going to Egypt with or without her approval. He asked her if she wanted to go with him. She said no, thank you. She didn't have a death wish like someone I know. Roy said that the plane crashed 2 years ago. She worried too much. He said he was also making a side trip to Israel. Pat said, "Go ahead. I'll call the funeral parlor so they know you'll be dropping by." Roy laughed. He said there was a greater chance of dying in a car accident in their own neighborhood than of being killed by terrorists in Egypt or Israel. "Yes," Pat said, "but we have to drive around our neighborhood to do our errands. We don't have to go to Egypt and Israel. You're just tempting fate." In New York, the residents at a senior center have been receiving free donuts and other baked goods for years. The sweets are donated by bakeries and other shops that have leftovers that are not quite fresh enough to sell. The seniors devour the sweets, but the city council has decided that these sweets are no good for the seniors. It just passed a law forbidding free day-old suites for the senior center. We want our seniors to live as long as possible, and these suites can only contribute to obesity. With obesity come high blood pressure, circulation problems, and diabetes. So we are doing this for their own good, said Karl Rove, a city council member. The senior citizens are having none of this. They immediately called Rove and other council members to protest this ban. Who are these people to tell us what to eat? Asked Doug Fairbanks, a resident at the center. I'll bet every one of them has a donut several times a week. Where do they get this attitude? They act like they are our parents. Instead, they are elected officials who are supposed to do the will of the people. And there isn't one person in the senior center who has complained about the free donuts. If they're concerned about seniors, are they going to prohibit all the seniors in the whole town from eating donuts? They can't just pick on us if they're interested in the health of all seniors. People get a little bit of power, and it goes straight to their heads. We are starting a petition to recall all the council members who voted for this law. May was hoping to broker cigarette lighters in America. Her friend said that Mr. Wang was a big manufacturer in China. She gave May Mr. Wang's phone number. May called Mr. Wang and invited him to Los Angeles. She arranged several meetings between Mr. Wang and some U.S. wholesalers. Because he did not speak English, she was the interpreter at the meetings. Mr. Wang promised to give May a commission for whatever business deal was made and for all future orders. The first 3 meetings were unproductive. The last meeting was with a Chinese wholesaler. He spoke Chinese, so there was no need for May to interpret his remarks. She sat there throughout the meeting and listened. The 2 men discovered that they both had grown up in Chengdu, a large city in southwest China. At meeting's end, no deal was made. Everyone shook hands. May and Mr. Wang walked out to her car. Then Mr. Wang said that he had forgotten something. He excused himself and walked back to the office. May waited a moment. Then, suspicious, she snuck back to the office and heard the 2 men making a deal behind her back. Mr. Wang was cutting her out of her commission. May went back out to her car and waited. Mr. Wang was whistling as he returned to the car. He apologized for making her wait. She said it was no problem. Then she drove Mr. Wang back to his hotel. He thanked her for her help and said he was returning to China the next day. She didn't say anything about what she had overheard. She went home and tried not to cry about what had just happened. She must be strong. Bill parked his car on the residential street. The street used to be safe, but now there were frequent reports in the weekly paper about break-ins. He put the club on his steering wheel and made sure that nothing of value, not even a pair of cheap sunglasses, was visible through the car windows. He got out of the car and started the uphill walk. The mountain trail was mostly narrow for the first 2 miles. Only 2 people could walk side by side. When the trail got close to the edge of the mountainside, it was best if people walked single file. Several years ago, an experienced hiker walking alone slipped and fell to his death. The trail went past a small lake created by a dam and then broadened as it went up into the heart of the mountain, away from cliffs. When Bill got to first camp, he stopped by the small stream to look for fish or frogs. Suddenly, he heard a sinister rattling sound. Then he felt a sharp bite on his calf. He turned around in time to see a rattler slithering off. There was nothing to do now but walk back down to his car. He had no cell phone with him. He would remember to bring it next time, if there was a next time. Should he walk slowly so the poison would spread slowly, or should he walk fast so he could get to his car and get medical help faster? Perhaps he'd meet someone on the way down. A simple walk, he thought. It was just going to be a simple walk up a mountain trail. Tamara Smith sliced open an eggplant. The seeds were arranged in the likeness of Elvis's profile. "Oh, my God!" Tamara screamed. She was the King's biggest fan. She had all his CDs and all the DVDs of his movies. She knew everything about the artist from Mississippi. She had been to his birthplace and to his memorial, Graceland, in Memphis. She had never actually seen him live, yet she worshipped him. She felt that she was his soulmate because they were both born on January 8th. She always claimed that Elvis would be alive today if she could have contacted him that fateful day. She had had a strange feeling that morning in her own bathroom. She sensed that there was danger for Elvis in his bathroom. She suspected that he might slip in the tub or maybe accidentally electrocute himself with his hair dryer. But she wasn't sure. All she knew was that Elvis must not use his bathroom that day. She dialed Memphis 411, but information told her that his number was not listed. She called the Memphis police, but they said she would have to get in line behind all the other crank callers. She called her cousin who lived in Memphis, but her cousin was out. She almost died when she saw the TV news that night, August 16th, the saddest day of her life. "I was right, I was right," she kept repeating to herself. If only she had gotten through to poor Elvis. Now she had this eggplant. It could mean only one thing. Elvis was trying to communicate with her. She wrapped the eggplant in saran wrap and put it in her refrigerator. The next day, she was going to visit Mabel, her palm reader medium manicurist, to have a seance. "Boy, this is the worst weed I've ever had," Wesley thought, even though it smelled great. He'd rolled 2 joints, smoked them both, and still didn't feel high. He'd heard about some super weed that gets people so high that they think they're straight. Maybe this was super weed. "Nah," he thought, "this is just crap." His best buddy had ripped him off. There was only one thing to do: call the police. Wesley told the police his problem. They said they would be right over. He went to the front door and unlocked it. Slowly, he printed Buster's phone number and address on a cigarette paper. He put it into the big baggie of grass. He wondered if his call was going to make TV news, or maybe the front page of the newspaper. "Good citizen, turns in drug dealer." Wow! The city might make him an honorary deputy sheriff. He lit another joint. Maybe the third one would be the charm. He heard the car doors closing and the footsteps approaching. All right, he thought. He wondered if they had brought a television crew with them. Maybe he'd make the 11 o'clock news. The police were very polite. They thanked him for Buster's phone number and address. Then they arrested Wesley. "What for?" he protested. "For possessing more than 28 grams of pot," an officer replied. "But this isn't pot. It's more not than pot." "Why do you think I called you? I got ripped off." "Well, we'll see about that after the lab analyzes it. If you're both lucky, you did get ripped off." It was a hot, sunny day. The waves off Santa Barbara were almost 3 feet high because of a distant Pacific storm. Surfers were having fun. Then the fun ended. One surfer started yelling. Surfers on the beach saw him swinging his arms. He went underwater. Then he came back up, shouting for help. He was in big trouble, said one woman on shore. She called 911. He was still shouting and fighting. They could not see a shark, but they knew the surfer was being attacked by one. Again the surfer went under. 4 surfers hopped onto their boards and swam rapidly out to the surfer. By the time they got to him, he was alone. The shark had given up on the taste of the rubber wetsuit and the battle that the surfer had put up. The 24-year-old man was groaning in pain, but he was still alive. The surfers put him on a board and paddled back to shore. "I don't think he's going to make it," said someone on the beach. "Look at that leg." A helicopter arrived shortly afterward. Paramedics hopped out and examined the victim. They thanked the surfers and the woman for their aid and put the man into the chopper. A hospital spokesman said an hour later that the surfer would survive. He was in fair condition. Meanwhile, because there was nothing they could do, and because the waves were still good, most of the surfers were out on